This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall,
Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Budget and Performance Committee. Can I ask everyone to make sure your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruption? So first of all, can I ask our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Assemblymember Hall and Assemblymember Polanski, for whom Assemblymember Best and Assemblymember Garbutt are here as substitutes. Assemblymember Wilson is also attending remotely.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our substitutes and remote joiners. We'll come to our main item of business in a moment, but first, can I just ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 on declarations of interest and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Noted. Well done. Minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of November 2025 to be signed by me as a correct record? Good. Excellent. And summary list of actions. Can I ask the committee to note the ongoing, completed and closed actions from its previous meetings? Good. And action taken under delegated authority. Can I ask the committee to note the recent action taken by me as chairman under delegated authority, namely to agree in consultation with party group lead members a letter to the Mayor of London relating to the Greater London Authority Mayor Draft Budget 2026-27. Good. Right. That now brings us to our main item this morning. We are looking at the 2026-27 Greater London Authority Group Budget, the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, also covering the Metropolitan Police. So I'd like to welcome this morning our panel of guests. We are joined by Kaya Comer-Schwartz, who is the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. We're joined by Amana Humayun, who's the Chief Finance Officer at MOPAC. We are joined by Dan Worsley, who's the Chief Finance Officer at MPS, and by Marie Heraklius, who's the Chief Business Services Officer at MPS. And later on this morning, we'll be joined by Lib Peck, who's the Director of the VRU. So let me kick off with an opening question to you, Dan. Just looking at the change from last year's budget to this year's budget, there was a £159 million funding gap that now appears to have been closed or substantially closed. So how have you gone about doing that?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'll say a little bit about this year's budget and and then bring it into next year. So this year is a really difficult year for the Met. We are a shrinking organisation and we are implementing a series of efficiencies and tough choices in order to balance what opened as a £450 million gap and we got to £260 million gap. So we are on track on this year's budget to deliver the plan. And a lot of the work that we've done in this financial year therefore contributes to the next financial year. When MOPAC published their group budget May, April this year, that set out for the MPS a medium-term financial plan gap of 150 million. Chair, I think the 159 is including MOPAC, the 150 is relevant to the Met. We have made a series of assumptions in our submission to MOPAC about how we will balance the books next year in order to seek to protect workforce numbers and invest in technology, innovation, precision policing. There is a significant caveat with that in that we've not yet got the provisional police settlement from the Home Office. We think that will land next week. And then kind of working through it chronologically, when the government announced the results of the spending review in the spring, we revised that gap down to 100 million because policing got a settlement at 1.7% above the cash basis, and that therefore closed some of our gap. In order to protect the size of the organisation and the workforce and therefore our performance, we have assumed a number of things to close that £100 million gap. We will be more efficient, so there's 20 million of efficiency that we will deliver subject to the budget process in 26-27. We will look at our balance sheet, which means we will remove some contingencies, and that takes out another 15 million. And one of the things that the Home Office did in this financial year was give us more NIC, so National and International Capital City Grant. This year we received 63.4 million. We have been and continue to talk to the Home Office about more recurrent income in the next financial year, and so the budget assumes that we may be given more NIC in order to close the £100 million gap. The result of all that is a more stable organisation that's able to hold its workforce size and shape and therefore continue to police in communities, drive performance. So that's how we've closed it. There's some income assumptions and there's some efficiency assumptions in the budget.
Okay, some of those I think we'll come on to in a bit more detail. Just, Nick will come on to in more detail, but did you say you're assuming that it will be increased and that's part of the closed gap?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned, you sort of mentioned in passing, I think managing the balance sheet is how it's referred to in the budget, and you mentioned that now about some contingencies. What does that mean in concrete terms?
So the Met, without trying to sound like an accountant, the Met has a pretty complicated balance sheet. There's a high holding of fixed assets, and we finance those through large capital borrowing. So that 50 million is generated from two things: the removal of contingencies at project and programme level that we can release because we want to centralise that and hold that centrally, but also how we capitalise, how we finance our assets. And so as a result of revising some of those calculations, we can close 15 million of that 100 gap through what we've termed in the papers that you've got managing the balance sheet.
Okay, I'm trying to understand whether that's like an actual real cut or just a change to the way the same things are financed.
It's not a cut in terms of our workforce or our services. It means that we will have slightly less contingency, and a good budget needs some contingency, but it will take away some of that. But to use your term, I don't think it's a real cut in that perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, if you'd sort of aim it a bit more at you. He has finished speaking. Okay, thanks, Dan. And Kaya, welcome. In terms of this budget, obviously one of the big manifesto commitments that the Mayor had on policing was about Met officer numbers, and of course headcount is the single biggest item by a long way in the Met budget. Where do you think this budget that we're looking at for next year leaves the Mayor's commitment for additional police officers, the 1,300 extra police officers?
In summary, on track. We know that we've been working throughout the year in terms of redeploying officers back to the front line of policing in neighbourhoods. We've got an additional 500 officers back into neighbourhoods this year, and we're working towards an additional 500 by the end of the year. So we're just working towards making sure that the priority is neighbourhood officers through redeployment of those officers and the additional money from government to make sure we have that ability to uplift in that way.
So that you're talking there about extra neighbourhood officers. I think we'll come on to this in a bit more detail, but just to clarify, at the 18th of September meeting of this committee, it was confirmed to us that the baseline for establishing the Mayor's manifesto commitment was 33,888 police officers and 1,403 PCSOs. That was the figure at May last year, so at the election point. And so the extra 1,300 officers would be on top of the 33,800, which will obviously take us to somewhere around about just over 35,000. And what are you forecasting? Isn't it 31,000 for the coming year?
That's the overall officer numbers, so that includes police staff. So we because
Sorry, that doesn't include, to be clear, that doesn't include police staff. That's just police officers. 31,258, I think, is the assumed police officer number for the coming year. So that's not PCSOs and it's not staff.
You're correct. You're correct. Yes, you're right. It's gone down from 2025 3,000 and 33,000 down to this year. By March 26th, we're moving to 31,258. But we're managing this through natural attrition, so we're not. It's the officers that we're losing kind of naturally through retirement, just people wanting to move out of the organisation and slowing down recruitment of those. So we're still recruiting, but not to the same level as previously.
Okay. I think we'll come back to that in more detail, but it sounds like the plan was to increase it by 1,300 and we're down by about 2,000.
Yes, but we've used the additional money from government to make sure that we're prioritising, as Londoners have told us what matters, is having those neighbourhood officers. So we're making sure that we're being flexible within the Metropolitan Police, civilianising officers where we can in the back office and moving them out to neighbourhoods.
Okay. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Good morning. Deputy Mayor, this time last year when we were scrutinising the budget, the line which was in our papers was that we would be seeing a reduction of hours in the police front counters, in direct contradiction to the Mayor's manifesto commitment. However, it later turned out that you've been having secret talks with the Mayor and the Metropolitan Police Commissioner regarding actually closing police front counters, which was not told to this committee. Is there anything else in this budget which you would now like to draw our attention to, which will be a direct break of a manifesto commitment about which you're having secret talks at the moment?
I mean, we know that last year we were put into a budget situation which was worse than we were expected, and to make sure that we had a balanced budget, we had to look at all areas of the police force. I think we've managed to get through the work that the police have done. Obviously, that's an operational decision, but the work the police have done to work with local stakeholders to make sure that the amount of access possible is there for frontline
this seems to be talking about what's happening now. What I was talking about is the fact that in the budget last year we had a line which said some reduced hours, not closure of police stations. So is there anything in this particular budget which has been ameliorated, finessed, but is actually code for secret cuts, which you're discussing with the Commissioner and the Mayor now? Because that's what happened last year.
Because we ended up getting, when I was in this position last year, we didn't have all of the figures in at that time, and we had to make choices throughout the year to get to where we needed to, and we had to do those things with neighbourhoods and policing in mind. But as the Commissioner has come in front of yourselves in PCC, we made a decision on the prioritisation, given that the majority of access to reporting is not done at front counters. And so in consultation with London and key stakeholders and those with protected characteristics, I feel we have got to a point where we have more access than the original proposal, and also that we're still on track in terms of the budget. What I would also, in answer to your question about this year's budget, no.
There's nothing?
No.
Okay, so because last year we had to demand an extraordinary plenary after the news about front counters was snuck out over the summer. We've had to summons the Mayor regarding the estate strategy. So can you say that now you have learnt the importance of openness, transparency and consultation in regards to bringing matters to this committee?
I would say, given that I have attended the committee every month through PCC and was happy to come to the additional meeting in August to talk about front counters, I've never hidden away from transparency or scrutiny.
Nobody's suggesting that that's an issue, but there was a lack of transparency and openness last time round. But there we are. If I can move over to Dan. What are the risks to the figure that you've assumed for additional funding from the June 2025 spending review, and how will you address any differences which may arise from the expectations which you've baked into these figures?
Can I just check you can hear me better with the microphone? Does that work?
Still, Elizabeth, yeah, bit for the floor. There's some projection.
I'll try and speak up a bit as well, if that's better. So we don't know what the provisional police settlement is. I hope we will know next week. I think it's the Home Office's intention to set it out next week, but we've not got a date. What we wanted to do in setting the principles of this budget was seek to protect the size and shape of our workforce whilst investing in technology, productivity and efficiency. We had done some work in the background on different scenarios, as you'd expect us to do, because if the income that we've assumed doesn't come through, then we need to look at where and when can we be more efficient. We've done a lot of work on efficiencies, and I'm really comfortable that the 20 million in my answer to the chair before, that's a reasonable figure from a quite a small part of our budget in terms of non-workforce efficiencies. If the income doesn't come through at that level or doesn't come through recurrently, we'll have to work with City Hall and MOPAC to look at what the impact might be on our workforce and our ability to recruit to the levels of attrition in order to protect the workforce. We've done some work behind the scenes on scenario planning about what that might look like. But until we get the provisional police settlement and we've worked through that and had conversations with colleagues at MOPAC and operational colleagues, we don't know what that will look like. We've done the scenario planning as a contingency measure whilst full-throatedly pushing for more income from the Home Office above and beyond the police settlement. So we're now in a position to wait and see what the settlement brings next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Clark.
Good morning, everybody. And Kaya, my question is for you, but before I take the question, I just wanted to highlight, because you were talking about the importance of having, and the importance Londoners place on having more police that are visible and present, and neighbourhood officers kind of walking the beat. But I think we saw that when we were out with Councillor Madlani and Councillor Archevsky in Camden. We were in Bloomsbury together just a few weeks ago. And what we saw there was clear that the neighbourhood officers working with security officers, all working together with the council, was making a huge impact in the south of Camden. So I just wanted to highlight that. But what is the impact of the police and crime plan on the budget?
The budget has been devised to support the ambitions of the police and crime plan. And so we've worked throughout to make sure that that and the new, obviously the new Met for London plan in terms of the police are set out to do that. And that's obviously with a focus on neighbourhood officers, but also making sure that the Met have the facilities they need to raise standards, so as well in terms of vetting and through learning and development as well, making sure that the values and standards we all expect from the Metropolitan Police are driven forward, as well as making sure that that neighbourhood policing offer in line with the PCP is as strong as it possibly can. And we're definitely seeing the results of that with the crime stats that we've seen this year in the areas that we've been focused on the high volume crimes, and similarly that we saw in Camden of total robbery being down by 8.4%, total burglary being down by 9.1%, theft from person being down by 6.1%, and vehicle offences being down by 14.2%. So it's very much along the lines of that prioritisation of neighbourhood policing standards and making sure that we get areas like public protection right.
Absolutely right. Thank you for that. And just again, just to say that I think we do see some really good examples of neighbourhood policing, and it's good that that's recognised by businesses and by residents as well when they see those improvements. And to highlight that at last week's Met for London meeting in Camden, a lot of that teamwork was highlighted, not just by councillors and Camden officers, but actually by the residents who attend those meetings. We're seeing a real difference. So thank you for that. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Best.
Thank you. Amana, if I could come to you first. How is MOPAC supporting the MPS addressing its budget gaps?
Firstly, we were pleased that the spending review announced the 1.7% increase to police spending power. Unfortunately, as Dan mentioned, that is a national figure, so we are waiting to find out, hopefully next week, what that translates to in terms of the Met's proportion of that. MOPAC has taken decisions historically to try and alleviate pressure from the Met's budget. So the MOPAC budget for 26-27 continues financial responsibility specifically within MOPAC. that would otherwise have fallen to the Met. So 2 examples that come to mind are statutory services that we are required to deliver. One is the Havens Service, which is the Sexual Assault Referral Centre. It's a statutory provision for male, female, child victims of rape. That is funded entirely now by MOPAC. At the time of transfer from the Met to MOPAC, there was a budget transfer at the time, several years ago. That budget transfer has held static, and actually demand on the service, sadly, has increased. The increased demand is being funded and absorbed by MOPAC. That's one area. A second area where pressure has been alleviated.
Quickly, Imana, how much money do you think that is?
Approximately £2 million. In terms of the transfer that was, the transfer from the Met to MOPAC was, I believe, 1.7. The cost of the service has now increased, and the additional cost to the tune of about 400k. That's now being absorbed by MOPAC entirely.
Okay,
And then the second,
so 400,000.
between 200 and 400,000. Apologies for memory. And then the second statutory service is the appropriate adults provision for vulnerable adults and for children. That's now entirely absorbed within the MOPAC budget without any budget transfer at all from the Met.
So what's the monetary value, do you think, of that?
That's approximately 2 million.
Okay, so so direct terms, about 2.5 million. Is there anything else MOPAC is doing to support the Met?
I'd say, firstly, historically, there have been some other examples where MOPAC has absorbed costs. So, for example, the work that we undertake on community scrutiny, also a statutory provision, also undertaken by MOPAC, but again, the decision to do that was taken several years ago. We are continuing to lobby government on the same grounds that Deputy Mayor and Dan have alluded to, so a further allocation of NIC this year. We were really fortunate to get an increase in NIC for the 25-26 budget. It was the largest increase we've seen in over a decade of the 63.4 million that Dan alluded to earlier. It's not guaranteed that we'll get a further increase this year, but we are lobbying government for that. And we are also hoping that the Home Office allows a further increase to precept. If that's possible, the Mayor will have a decision to make as to whether he will increase precept any further, but that could potentially generate more income for the Met Police.
I think that's a given, unless you're talking about the precept being risen beyond the threshold now.
We will find out in the provisional police settlement, hopefully next week, as to whether it can be raised any further.
Okay. So a couple of the examples there you're really pulling on are statutory services being transferred to MOPAC, but they all seem fairly historical. Is that not something that's happening in the next financial year?
The appropriate adult service was...
any similar absorptions?
I don't believe there's anything proposed in the 26-27 budget where we are taking, unless I've forgotten anything. But I just want to say that
so
you're right.
The helpful examples you pointed to help the Met are historical. And now that there's this big budget saving to find, there's not any new examples of what you were suggesting.
The appropriate adult service has only been in place for about a year, so it's
sorry, for the
historical.
next year, because you're pointing to stuff that has been absorbed in previous years and will continue to be, but that's not something that you're looking to do more of going into the next budget, it sounds like.
I think it's important. I mean, the services that we absorbed previously were statutory services, and that's why we took on that responsibility. I think it's also important to recognise, obviously, we work closely with the Met on through our commissioning, making sure that we're working on the complex areas of crime that have really positive criminal outcomes. We work with the Metropolitan Police.
I have a couple more questions.
In terms of
if it's not an answer to the question I asked, then I'd rather not, because I was just asking if we were going to...
Oh, sorry, I thought the committee might be interested in the other ways we support the Metropolitan Police Service.
I would be interested, but we can't. I've asked that question to Amana, and I gave her a few opportunities. We went down the road of taking those statutory
That's fine,
services.
Chair. Thank you.
And I asked if there was any more.
No, we haven't been asked by the Home Office.
Okay.
Obviously, we work closely with the Home Office and MOJ all the time to work with the Metropolitan Police Service through grants and other things.
Yeah.
But
So if we go back to 2017, the MOPAC obviously really helped the Met with the public access strategy when they were looking at police stations that be closed. Obviously, we've established MOPAC didn't do that work for this round of police closures. Is there some learning for that of how MOPAC can support? MOPAC's biggest strength is perhaps data and trying to find that data and consultation. It did not do that fundamental work for the Met this time round to tell them about police stations. Is that some learning going into future, and as the Met are in this difficult position, looking at how to support them with data like that?
we work closely with the Metropolitan Police Service all the time in terms of data and insight. For example, we've been working closely with them on recent research on body-worn cameras and on stop and search. We've also been working with them closely through the Data and Insight Service to look at the work we were doing in the Safer Streets initiative, so we can use the data that we have to work with local authorities to improve the outcomes of those proposals and bring back the evaluation from those. So we do that all the time.
I think we're talking at cross purposes, Deputy Mayor. I'm not actually having a go at MOPAC. I'm saying the one thing I recognise it does well is data. I know there's lots of examples. You don't need to list them. What I'm saying is there is an example recently of where there's been a massive budget cut and MOPAC did not do the data work that it used to do. So I'm saying going forward, looking specifically at budget savings, not other areas, looking at budget savings, those big areas of budget savings, will MOPAC support with the data survey and consultation around that?
We absolutely will if there's opportunity to. The Met does have its own data and performance team as well, and they lead initially on any requirements for that sort of work. You're right, we have an excellent evidence and insight team, and should the Met require their support, they can absolutely utilise their services. And it is relevant that the Deputy Mayor has listed some recent examples where work done by the MOPAC evidence and insight team has informed the operations of the Met. Could I, Assembly Member Best, if you wouldn't mind, could I just come back to your earlier question? One thing that I didn't mention in terms of why there isn't more, I think you were asking, why is there not further financial support proposed in the 26-27 budget from MOPAC into the Met? I have statutory responsibilities for the PCC, for MOPAC, and as you know, our budget for 26-27 started with a forecast structural deficit. So I do have a responsibility to ensure that's closed in the first instance, and that's been a equal priority as well as supporting the Met.
Yeah, we know that both MOPAC and the Met have been screwed by the government, so I do appreciate that, Amana, thank you. But just one final question, Chair, I'm so sorry. I want to clarify, Dan, what we're looking at for the national insurance contributions again this year. Obviously, there was a grant from government to help last year. Do we know roughly how much extra we're looking at this year? And then separately, Deputy Mayor, if you've supported in trying to get that grant next week.
So we've assumed that the grant is just for this year, for the support you talked about. So the budget takes account for the contributions that we're required to pay as employers. Until we see the provisional police settlement, I don't know what's in there. So the budget obviously allows us to pay those contributions. Any pressures because of the loss of specific funding are baked into that gap. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I mean, it would be good to... We were looking at 45 million increase last year. Is it something similar this year?
Yeah, because the level of contributions has stayed the same.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Obviously, staff will fluctuate, so that's yeah. And Deputy Mayor, have you made representation specifically on getting a grant again this year to pay for those national insurance contributions?
Yeah, as part of the conversations we've been having with government to make sure that we make the case for London. Overall, in terms of policing, we've been making it really clear that why policing in London is different, and part of that is the additional costs that we incur by being in a capital city. It's part of the reason that we talked about Nick earlier in the conversation, but as well as when we look at grants for uplifting and special grants around uplifting and policing, it's important that we outline to the government all of the aspects of that.
Thanks. Actually, just a quick one, another one about assumptions, Dan. In the government uses this phrase, spending power, which includes an assumption about council tax precept increase. Have you assumed, I appreciate it's not within your gift to decide, but have you assumed in your budget what precept increase there might be for this coming year?
Yeah, so in terms of our assumption on precept, we take the GLA budgeting guidance and we've applied that in the budget. So we what's the word I'm looking for? We adhere to the budget guidance which the GLA sets for us, and that specifically covers the level of precept increase to assume.
So what is that? Like in pounds or percent?
So it's 3. So we've assumed 3% is set out in the guidance. To just give you some numbers, if the provisional police settlement allows the mayor to, for an average Band D property, charge a £14 precept, that would represent a 4.4% increase rather than 3%, and that's worth £15 million to the Met. But the assumption in the budget is the 3% in line with the GLA guidance.
Sorry, £50 million, did you say?
15.
Okay.
Which is the difference between 3% and 4.4%.
Understood. Okay. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got all the new Met for London plans on my desk. Find the right papers. My first question is about the 50 million increase in the people and resources expenditure for 26-27. So Dan, coming to you. So that's compared to the 25-26 forecast. So just wanting to understand what that is and what it's trying to deliver.
A lot of it is inflation. All of our budget, broadly 80% is pay. And so we have set an assumption on pay inflation. There are other factors in that, but the large driver of the increase year on year is pay growth.
And related to this section, just around kind of human resources and people, I was interested in the line in the budget submission that we've got around professionalism, and I just wondered what is included in that line. So I'm looking at page 14 of the document we've got, and it's just got under Metropolitan Police, one of the lines says professionalism, and it's got like 137.5 million against it. So I didn't know what professionalism includes.
So professionalism is led by an assistant commissioner. It's the work that we do on conduct, culture, behaviours, diversity. The vetting sits as part of professionalism. And so it's the work that's led by AC Williams in the professionalism business group, but it's around culture and development and vetting. And the budget is a continuation of the work that's been done this year in professionalism.
So does that also include, I think you said misconduct there, does it include misconduct and kind of handling of complaints? Is that in that line or is that somewhere else?
Yeah. So misconduct and internal grievances and complaints sit in the professionalism part of the business, part of the organisation.
Internal grievances, so is that when a member of the public has complained about a situation? So all of that comes through here. Do you know how much of that is dealing with complaints?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I can get you a breakdown of the 137.
That would be really helpful. I'd be really
I don't have it off the
interested in
top of my head, sorry.
And in New Met for London 2, I've just been trying to compare the differences, which we do come on to later, but just on this topic, there are some new... I've seen that there's not a huge amount of difference, but there's a couple of new things around dealing with subculture. So does that come in here? Are there more resources going to that bit? Because that is a bit of a change between the consultation document and the new one.
Yeah, so in terms of our reform money, we have assumed that we will spend next year the same level that we spent this year on reform that incorporates New Met for London and New Met for London Phase 2. So this year we have a revenue budget, there's a capital budget as well of 63 million, and the budget assumes we will first spend a further 63 million on reform and the bits that you touched on in terms of New Met for London 2 in the 26-27 financial year.
So I'm assuming some of the new... Sorry, I've got too many copies of this and I now can't work out which one I'm meant to be looking at. I've been comparing the two. Yeah, I'm assuming some of that came out from the Charing Cross. Yeah, it just is interesting that it's dealing with subculture as a specific element. So it's not that that's increased since the consultation document in the summer. It's not like you've put more money into that. It's just going to be more work within that budget.
Broadly, yes. As we were consulting on the New Met for London 2 plan, particularly with the Charing Cross incidents, the sequencing and the prioritisation and the intensification is what we've moved around. And so there's not been a significant increase in terms of the 63 million as a result of that, but elements have been resequenced and intensified so that we can, as you touch on, accelerate the culture work particularly.
Great, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you. I'm going to touch on an issue that I think has already been mentioned by Aman on the NIC grant, and it's already been mentioned that you've had conversations and been lobbying on this. Have you had any feedback or any thoughts back? Maybe Aman or Dan, if you want to come in.
I'm happy to start, and Aman, I might want to build. No is the short answer. If I stand back, one of the things that Aman and I have spent a lot of time on is our relationship with the Home Office and the police funding team, and it's in a good position. They understand the risk in our budget, and they understand our ask in terms of the Met submission to MOPAC and MOPAC's group budget that is published. But we've not had any feedback, and officials won't give us any feedback ahead of the provisional police settlement next week.
The only point I'd add is if there is any increase in NIC, it comes out of the same pot of money that the Home Office have for policing grants. So if there is, for example, a further allocation, it would impact all forces, including the Met's core allocation, if that makes sense. So we know that that's something that the Home Office have been deliberating carefully.
Okay. And Dan, have you been proposing different models to them? So, if you look at the example of the last few years with the rise in protests in central London, for example, which probably wasn't an issue in the same scale, let's say about 10 years ago, although there may have been different challenges, but obviously it's been far different in the last few years. So are you looking at different models, such as maybe linking it to demand or issues that happened and actual events in central London that have that pressure on your budget?
Yeah, so there's at a macro level, the budget has pressure because we want to be able to afford and sustain a workforce, and a lot of that is about the core grant, the level of precept, and the level of NIC that we get. We're also constantly talking to the Home Office about special grant, which are the rules that cover things like protest, particularly inquiries that we do, and the special grant rules provide us with funding for some of those costs, not all of those costs, and don't often pay for the opportunity cost of taking an officer, for example, as a neighbourhood abstraction and putting them onto a special grant piece of work. The Home Office understand those pressures. I meet the funding director on a fortnightly basis with Amana, and we put information into them. So they're really aware of the pressure and the rules and the funding pressure it creates for us internally. And I think they're doing what they can to help. But until we see the provisional police settlement, I don't know what that looks like.
So that's interesting, sort of your response to that. So what would your kind of preference be in terms of how the money comes in? Because obviously you have NIC, but you have the special grants. I know, obviously, in the last 2 or 3 years where we've had coronations and the death of the Queen, that's come in and been quite helpful in terms of what the Met have had to deliver in London for those events. Would you prefer that that's more kind of the model, which is more of a demand-linked model, if you like, compared to what we have with NIC, which is obviously a grant which that there's probably more control over the course of the year of how that's spent?
I'll give you a kind of straight CFO statutory answer to that, and colleagues, colleagues might want to add to that. From a financial resilience point of view, the best thing that we can have is recurrent, unconditioned money. and then the Commissioner can choose how to spend that in line with his personal responsibilities with regard to the police and crime ban, and in consultation with Deputy Mayor and the team at MOPAC. And so recurrent funding that doesn't come with conditions enables us to best run an effective and efficient police force. We absolutely recognise there are specific risks and opportunities and things that happen which mean that the Home Office have and will continue to need particular funding streams around protest or kind of really serious incidents. And we recognise that. We have had conversations with the Home Office about the rules that govern special grants and what that means for the Met, and they understand that pressure it creates. But in terms of an ask, our best route to stability and resilience would be unconditional recurrent funding, which the NIC allows for. So if we have one ask, it would be that the NIC is about £180 million short of where it ought to be. And if the Home Office had the resources through the spending review, that's what we'd be kind of influencing them to put it into that, rather than specific condition pots, which might or might not be recurrent.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Very much. We now move on to a section looking at officer recruitment and staff. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Madam Deputy Mayor, how are you maintaining neighbourhood policing levels when faced with a reduction in the overall level of police officers? I feel like you've alluded to part of the answer before, but if there's anything you feel you've missed, please go for it.
Yeah, I mean, in summary, it's by the prioritisation of the redeployment of officers to neighbourhoods. I'll add to the point that Assembly Member Clark made earlier. Through our collaborative approach in working alongside neighbourhoods, businesses, statutory services, we've really been able to focus on a data-led approach that enables us to focus on hotspot crime, so making sure that where we're prioritising those officers across all neighbourhoods, we also have the additionality of doing hotspot area, high volume crime. So this year we've looked at doing that in Brixton, Kingston, Ealing, Finsbury Park, Southwark, Spitalfield and the West End, and have seen positive outcomes because of that.
Thank you very much for that response. Now, in your previous answer, you began explaining the significant drop of what around 2,630 police officers was due to attrition. You know, people retiring, leaving the force, not wanting to work. Well, that's what you said, but they said didn't want to work here anymore, moved to different forces across the country. Now, we know that the Mayor of London was offered 60 million from the previous Conservative government for recruitment, and then subsequently lost the 60 million for additional recruitment because he was the only police and crime commissioner in the country not to meet officer recruitment targets. So I would ask you, has the current Labour government, after it came into power, offered the Mayor another attempt at this £60 million? So have they offered that additional funding for recruitment?
The government have been making sure that in line with their manifesto that they have been giving us additional funding for neighbourhood policing, and that is something that last year we very much uptook, and it led to a lessening of our reduction of officers. So we were able to protect 935 neighbourhood officers because of that. So we're working closely with government, and it's brilliant to have that alignment between their ambitions in terms of prioritising high volume neighbourhood crime, our ambitions, and obviously working closely with the Met to deliver that. And we've seen that the money that we've used through neighbourhoods has enabled us to do that, and we've seen the results because of that in the statistics I gave earlier on neighbourhood outcomes.
I'm really struggling to understand then how we could see such a net drop-off in police officers. I mean, you already answered it in your first exchange with Assembly Member Garrett. You know, we've gone from just over 33 to now around 31,000. So I find it hard to understand how those jobs have been protected, but still we've had a significant drop-off in numbers. you know, I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Okay, that's...
And also, in your response, if you could tell us how much money. So, as I said, the previous government gave 60 million, offered 60 million. Can you tell us how much this current government have offered for recruitment?
The current offer is 45 million.
Right.
I think it's important that we look at the overall package and context of what we're doing. We're dealing with a deficit that was created by previous governments that enabled a gap of 1.1 billion. The police have been working to enact that gap. But as the Commissioner said himself, there's no more low-hanging fruit. So through the last budget, which we touched on at the beginning, we've had to work through a gap of 450 million, which we have done in terms of, and that has meant that looking at decreasing the amount of officers overall, but what I'm saying in terms of the uplift in neighbourhood teams, in neighbourhood officers, is what we've done is we have made sure that the officers that were in kind of more back office roles have been redeployed to those neighbourhood teams, and through a mixture of recruitment of police staff and reductions, we've managed those numbers.
Madam Deputy Mayor, I appreciate this is the line that the Mayor's going with, that effectively, we're seeing more police on the streets, but there's but the reality is there's been a massive reduction in the overall number. And I would just really wish if somebody could just be incredibly honest and just say, yes, there has been a reduction in the overall numbers. And quite frankly, the 45 million, even if we were to spend it all, is not going to decrease the gap in the loss of officers that we've had, which is around 2,600. I mean, those are just the facts, aren't they?
I'll be very clear then. Sorry if I'm not being clear.
No, I appreciate
because of the
exchange.
budgetary context in which the Metropolitan Police Service found itself due to the underfunding of previous governments, there has been a gap that has been created. The Metropolitan Police Service, alongside ourselves, have worked to reduce that gap by shrinking the amount of officers overall in the Metropolitan Police Service. But when you are given, like any budget, like you might have at home, when you are given less, you work on what is the most important. And what we've heard from London is what is most important is neighbourhood officers. And with that in mind, in consultation with the Police and Crime Plan, we've worked really hard with the Met, and I'm sure Marie might want to come in later on that, into redeploying officers from some of those back office roles into neighbourhood policing to make sure that we have the strongest neighbourhood offer possible.
OK, well, look, I'll leave it there for now, and thank you for your time.
So just quickly, could you give us an example of a back office role that someone would be redeployed from?
It would be something like maybe call handling or administration within the HQ or anything like that. Marie?
Yes, so it's made up of officers where we've been civilianising roles. The majority of areas have come from our METCC call handling service, where we have now put staff and replaced those officers, and they've been redeployed. There are a number of areas which were kind of more like what would be kind of specialist roles, so officers doing kind of some finance and local HR type activities. All of those are being replaced with staff, and they are being redeployed onto the front line. And then there are also other roles where they are policey, like civilian investigators, but they don't require a warrant, and therefore those roles are being civilianised too. So we're making kind of different decisions around those to enable us to redeploy officers back out into frontline policing.
Got it. Thanks. I've got Assemblymember Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, panel. My question is to you, Dan. I was just looking through this graphic that we were given about the MOPEC consultation budget 26-27. I noticed that the overtime figure is something in the region of £186.5 million. Can you tell us more about this? Because that's a rather a very sort of large sum?
We're a large police force, and overtime is one of the mechanisms we use to respond to demand and things that are going on. So there are genuine business reasons for us to control and give officers overtime or workforce overtime. And so at the scale across an organisation of 40,000 people that spends £5 billion, my assessment as a Section 151 officer is that it's a reasonable overtime budget. If I sort of get to the heart of your question, do we want to do more on controlling overtime, better forecasting the demand, and working out the most productive way to deploy police officers and frontline staff to situations? Yes, we do. And I think there's more that we can do there, particularly with kind of Marie's team and my team working together. So we've got more control and grip over time than we've had in the past. There's more to do. But it's the budget as it's set, it's a reasonable estimate of the demand that comes in, the population that we've got, the substantive workforce that we've got, and therefore how might we have people work longer hours or do particular shifts. But it's a large number on a piece of paper, and that's really because of the size and the nature of what the Met does.
So, I mean, who sanctions overtime at operational level? Presumably it's the Borough Commander's Office. I mean, this has been a controversial area in the past, and ex-police officer friends of mine have sort of told me about practices in the past, I may add, which would be frowned upon today, but it is a large sum.
Marie will give you a fuller answer than I'm able to.
Yeah, so each of the OCUs have an authorisation method. For example, in METCC, where Dan alluded that that service, for example, works on an 80-20 model because of the surge of calls that you get at different times. If you had full-time permanent members of staff, say, in that OCU, delivering to the top peak of when your calls came in effect, a lot of the other time you'd be overstaffed. So what we do is we have a baseline number of staff, and then we proactively have some of the times where it is we offer overtime to cope with those demands. All of that is run by a back office team, but it is authorised by the kind of OCU commander or his SLE or her SLE to determine that. That's just in one OCU where it is, in effect, managed and run and organised and operated in that way. That is the same in other areas. And then if you've got something like frontline policing, because we've already talked about, there are a number of abstractions that we have to go to do public order activities, for example. If there is overtime required, then there is a mechanism set up where the supervisor or the person in charge will then authorise that. You can't just do overtime. It has to be authorised for a particular reason. And it's all run by kind of in a system that is controlled.
Presumably, a lot of this overtime figure is due to the marches we've had around the Gaza issue over the last 18 months?
Some of that will have driven the overtime that's required.
Yeah. I did have a figure for how much it cost to police the Gaza marches in up to early 2025. If you can give us the latest figure, not now, but yeah, since the marches first started, which was what, some 3 years ago? So, yeah.
I take your nod as you can write back to the committee with a breakdown of that figure. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I just want to pick up on this business of redeploying officers from backroom duties to fill the vacancies and positions in neighbourhood policing. That's not entirely the case, is it? We are using, I mean, for example, the Royal Parks Police, which was disbanded on your watch. Declaration of interest, Claxon, Chair. They are now being deployed to neighbourhood policing. So it's not all back offices. There is frontline policing, which is going on to try to muddy the waters in terms of saying this is going into neighbourhood policing, isn't it? And we can also include safer travel teams, we can include schools officers, lots of other actual frontline officers are being used to deploy into vacancies within the neighbourhood teams. Is that not correct?
Yes, it is correct, and some of those choices were around efficiencies, but some of them were the Commissioner's operational choice to make sure that, as he describes it, that the neighbourhoods were the priority and getting back to ensuring the core policing. So, for example, the change around schools officers wasn't primarily driven by funding. It was driven by an operational need to strengthen the neighbourhood teams and expand the expertise of those officers working with children. And that is a positive that has come with the changes around the redeployment of teams.
There are differences of opinions. As we've heard at this actual panel, we had a head teacher of a school in, I think, Southwark, if I remember correctly, who thought it was an absolutely terrible decision. But that's not for
Sure,
here.
and there are other head teachers that feel that police officers should never have been in schools. So there are definitely differences of opinion.
Just on that rather bad decision to disband 150 years worth of Royal Parks policing, which was a political decision. It wasn't challenged by the Mayor, and that was a political decision, not an operational decision. Would it surprise you now to learn that there are officers from Kensington and Chelsea neighbourhood teams being redeployed to do the job of the Royal Parks Police in terms of policing the Royal Guard changes at Buckingham Palace? Which is,
no, it wouldn't surprise me, as we've discussed many times in PCC, when the need arises, there's one Metropolitan Police Service and
the need arises
deployed.
because you cut the Royal Parks Police that used to do that job. So now we're abstracting neighbourhood policing to fill the gaps that you created. You cut the Royal Parks Police along with the Mayor and the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. You created the vacancies, and they are being taken out of neighbourhood policing, which is entirely the reverse of what you wanted to achieve.
We had to take difficult decisions in order to make a balanced budget. You know, we can't pretend that the legacy of austerity hasn't come.
Nothing to do with austerity.
Yes, it is. It's years of underfunding from previous governments, which means
and now
that
you're
we
having to
have had
backfill
to
those
make
roles with
difficult
neighbourhood
choices.
police officers.
Chair, would you like me
which
to
is
answer the question?
Well, you aren't. I mean, there's always a first time for everything, Deputy Mayor, so please do.
I am saying that rightly we have to set a balanced budget. That is a legal requirement, and in order to do so, we took difficult choices about where some of those policing went. Through consultation, we also looked at, in the parks that had the highest footfall, ensuring that there was additional money allocated to that through money that we got later on from government. Yes, we took political decisions in the context of a difficult budget, and we have to stand by those decisions. The level of need in London, as we've discussed at the beginning of this meeting, around ensuring that we get the NIC, is because we have additional requirements, like you said, around the changing of the guard. It's also because we have state vigilance. It's also because we have public order protests. We are very aware that we are a capital city and that we have one Metropolitan Police Service, and that's why we're actively talking to government about the importance of the NIC and making sure that we can do the best that we can for our capital city.
OK, well, when I think people went to the polls in May of last year, Chair, that people weren't expecting the Royal Parks Police and they certainly weren't expecting police to be taken off their streets in order to backfill the roles caused by that particular cut. But no further, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Wilson.
Good morning, panel. Thank you, Chair. So my question will be mainly directed towards Dan about issues of recruitment levels in order to maintain the target of 31,258 officers. But before I do that, I don't want to overly re-rehearse what's already been said, conscious of the questions from Assembly Member Garrett and Gergie in particular. But I would just like to note that obviously whatever you're comparing this to, it's a shortfall compared to whether it's compared to the baseline figures in May 2024, whether it's the existing position in September 2025, it's a 2.5% shortfall compared to that, or whether if the manifesto pledge of 1,300 officers had been new officers, it's an even bigger shortfall to that. And I understand, Kaya, from what you've said, that a lot of it is about redeployment. I'm not sure that was made particularly clear during the election, but I'll leave that there. So the question that I have then is to Dan. So what levels of recruitment are you anticipating in the forthcoming year in order to maintain those numbers at 31,258? And how does that compare to the number of officers that you would expect to be leaving? And how are you balancing those?
Thank you. I'll start, and Marie might correct me where I go off piece, because this is her area. So broadly, and for a long time, the Met has seen attrition of around 7%. That moves. But that in effect means we lose around 2,200 officers a year, all other things being equal. In this financial year, we will recruit 700 officers, and Marie will nuance this, to maintain 31,258 officers from the 1st of April 2026 to the 31st of March 2027. We will therefore need to recruit 2,200. We have strengthened the mechanisms throughout this financial year about how we monitor both our recruitment pipeline and attrition, MI and forecasting, so that we can balance that tension in order to make sure that we hit the workforce plans that we've set, that are underpinned by the budget. But I should turn to my colleague, who's more informed than I am on the kind of recruitment and attrition.
No, that's correct. I think it's just important to note that if attrition went up, we would have to recruit more officers. But at the moment, and over the last couple of years, it has remained steady. It hovers between 6.7 and 7%. So next year we forecast it around 7%. But if it went up, we would have to recruit more than 2,200. But broadly, that's correct.
Thank you. And how does that figure of 7% compare to other forces around the country?
Our attrition rates are pretty good, so we compare kind of favourably to around the country. So when you look at the national picture, I think attrition runs from about 7.5% to 8% across some forces. So we're in a pretty good position.
Okay, thank you. And do you see any particular challenges relating to London in terms of both retention and recruitment of new officers? What are the hurdles to overcome in encouraging both the existing officers to stay and new officers to join?
So I think one of the challenges, because of being in the capital and the high cost of living, is pay. That I think has an impact, and we've been pushing hard for an increase in the base rate for PCs, because you have to live within the surrounding area. So even if you live just outside of London, your majority are living in the southeast. So I think that has quite a big impact of standard kind of cost of living. And then other areas that we've been looking at is, it's been mentioned that we have had to make tough choices. We've had to close some specialist OCUs, and that's difficult for some officers who have spent time kind of specialising and being within those OCUs and now moving to other roles. So we've been very mindful of that, and been very kind of watchful of what that could do with attrition as we redeploy officers around the Met. And I mean, it's still that is still happening now. So that is one of the areas that we think could play through, which is one of the reasons why we keep an eye on attrition so closely.
Thank you. Perhaps a quick sort of follow-up to Kaya relating to this. Are you concerned about reports or reported levels of morale in the Met? From the Met Federation survey, very, very high levels of low morale. Do you see that as being a contributing factor to making it difficult to recruit? But secondly, And I guess more importantly, what would you be doing to try and combat that? I'll ask that first.
Thank you. Yes, obviously staff morale is always important to keep an eye on. I think given some of the things that Marie laid out in terms of internal change, that's something that I know the Commissioner is very conscious of and is trying to make sure that we work to be aware of that level of change. I think some of it is positive. I know that some officers are happy to be redeployed into frontline roles and are excited about a new challenge after some stagnation, for a lack of a better term. I think in terms of what we can do, we're actively supporting the Met in their development around recruitment and also training to make sure that the recruitment offer, not only in how we're displaying the great work of the Metropolitan Police Service, what the Metropolitan Police Service can mean, both in neighbourhood terms, but also some of the more specialised roles. I'm sure, like me, Assemblymember Wilson, you've seen some of the great comms work that the Metropolitan Police Service has put out in terms of community crime fighting and tackling high-volume crime. So we're trying to support them in that, but also making sure that through the training, learning and development, there's a really clear narrative around not only what policing is and should be, but also how they can see themselves contributing to that.
Thank you. One final sort of point or comment or question that I'll make is I speak to officers and retired officers on a fairly regular basis, and one of the regular complaints they say to me is that they feel they don't have strong enough support from the senior leadership, both operational and, more importantly, political. And yeah, I'm going to mention the Chris Cabba case as an example of that. Obviously, that's a very high-profile case, but there are others. Do you recognise this suggestion? And these are officers that are either considering leaving or have left. Do you recognise that suggestion that there's not the kind of instinctive level of support from their superiors? And if so, what would you do to address that?
I mean, I've from my working with the police, and I think some of the changes recently in work to support the senior leadership. I know the Commissioner brought together 700 of the most senior officers to talk to them post the Charing Cross Panorama show about the kind of leadership they should be displaying, and working closely with them. Similarly, when I've been out on the New Met for London roadshow events, it's very clear that we've got a lot of young officers really excited about the work that they are doing, and it felt very supportive in that way. I'm sure we can always do more, and I'm conscious that Marie, as part of her work, audits the exit interviews and makes sure that we're taking the learning from those. I think I don't think we can underestimate that, especially in some of those specialist roles. And I worked with the London Policing Board on working in the firearms culture and department. The level of difficulty that job is, you're making, very high intensity, difficult decisions, and that has to be recognised. And some of the mental health support and welfare support that the Metropolitan Police Service has now put in place is a reflection of that, and we've been very supportive alongside that work.
Thanks very much. Thanks, you, Chair.
Thanks. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you, Chair. And just to quickly point out, it's not anecdotal evidence from Assemblymember Wilson. It is based as well, that public commentary aspect on the September 24 Strategic Workforce Planning report from the Met, where they literally stated that it's the public commentary around trust and confidence and regime stacked against officers. So that is literally not just from Assembly members, and that's obviously incumbent on us all to improve that. Deputy Mayor, turning to yourself, the 26-27 budget no longer references the Met's ambitious under the previous government to have 38,000 officers and 19,000 staff. Now under this government, the Met has removed that ambition Do you know what the new ambition is?
In the spending review submission that we sent to the government earlier on this year, it is still 38,000 because we reflect that that's the level of officers that we'd need in terms of making sure that, at its very best, we'd have the police force that we want.
It's no longer in the 26-27 budget. It was an ambition that was stated in the previous budget. The budget obviously being different to commentary on the spending review.
Yeah, so it's part of the submission to the spending review.
No, sorry,
but
we're
I
talking
think
about the budget.
in terms of the budget, we're obviously trying to set a budget that is prudent and realistic and based on the likely assumptions that we've previously got from government and the precepts. So.
Okay. If I'll just go back to the question again and repeat. So the 26-27 budget no longer states the ambition to recruit 38,000 officers and 19,000 staff. That was the ambition that the Metropolitan Police had under the previous government. Now, under this new government, with the budget as we know it to be and the spending settlement as it's likely to come, what is the new ambition for officers and staff?
I don't think the ambition has changed. It hasn't. That's why it was in the submission. The fact that it's not stated in the budget doesn't mean it's still not an ambition. That ambition is there. Yeah. It means that the budget is reflective on
So will we put it back into the budget then? Is that an omission then? It sounds like that's an unfortunate omission. So will it be back in the budget the next time we're looking at this?
I mean, we could do.
The Met submission, I don't want to talk too much about process, but the Met make their budget submission into MOPAC, and then MOPAC own the document which you're referring to that was published on the 21st of November. It was actually my decision as the MOPAC CFO what is included from the Met submission into the MOPAC one and what is excluded. As the Deputy Mayor has said, the budget is not a statement of ambition like the spending review is. It's an indication of how we're planning on using our resources for 26-27 based on a as realistic as possible assessment of what the funding is.
Why did you do it last year?
So it wasn't a... that was in the run-up to a spending review. Whereas this time round, in November, we knew what the outcome of the spending review was. A 1.7% increase to police spending power nationally was not under any cut-up of that total 1.7, would never allow 38,000 officers to be recruited by the Met Police. So they were both statements at points in time. It was felt to be appropriate to include the vision statement in the budget the previous year because it was just in advance of a spending review.
So
we weren't in that position in November.
We were happy to make ambitious targets for the Met under the previous government, but now we are not happy to make ambitious targets set out in the budget. I wonder why.
The ambition hasn't changed.
Then why is it not in the budget?
Because we have a spending review outcome that would never afford 38,000 officers.
But you understand, I know, Amana, you would understand that budgets can shift in year. The government can change its mind. Why would we stop being ambitious? I don't think under the previous government, the Deputy Mayor or Mayor would say, oh, well, that's it. The government have said it's what it is. In fact, I know it's not because the Deputy Mayor went out petitioning when it was the former government. So I don't think we stop being ambitious just because the spending review has said one thing.
I want to be clear that none of us, including myself, have stopped being ambitious. And when our conversations with government, we are definitely ambitious in that and pushing for the highest level of funding reflective of the needs of London. And that's similarly been the case post this last spending review. The Mayor was very clear on the need to continuing to push for funding for London. So the ambition, as we've all said, hasn't changed. We're conscious of what we need and we continue to talk actively to government about what we need in terms of officer numbers. But as Amana said, we're reflecting in the budget what we're doing and forecasting for the year ahead.
It really doesn't cut it, Deputy Mayor. If it is the ambition, if it's what you want, then put it in the budget the way you previously did. There's no talking around it. I mean, it's just a fact. If it's the ambition, if you believe it, keep putting it in the budget.
Absolutely, while being mindful of the constraints, it is our ambition too.
Yeah. This is all you need to care about. All your job is the deputy mayor for policing and in London, right? That is it's the government's issue how it funds you. It's the mayor's issue how he funds other areas. All you should be caring about and asking about is that your ambition
I have unequivocally
is in the budget.
said I am fully ambitious for the budget, that we're actively lobbying, actively talking to government about the needs for Londoners. I didn't stutter in that. I'm very clear that we have those ambitions and we've expressed those ambitions to the government nationally. So I don't really, there's not a disagreement here, Emma. If anything, we're agreeing. I mean, it's semantics about whether it's in the current budget or last year's budget or not.
It's not
but
semantics, it's really important. It's really important. And even when we had a Conservative government, we as Assembly members always supported more funding into the police. We always supported those calls. We always signed every letter. We were willing to sign up to everything. We believed the Met needed more funding, right? I supported that ambition when it was submitted to when we had a Conservative government. I'm asking you to do the same now. I don't think it's just semantics.
And
it's
I'm saying, Emma, I'm very happy and open to say we need to push for all we can. I come to PCC every month and say, you know, I'm concerned about the level of public order shift that the police are doing. I'm concerned about, you know, that's why we're talking actively about the NIC and what Londoners need. I'm not shying away from that ambition. I've just stated it again.
Okay, well, I look forward to it being in the budget then, hopefully. If I could move on, Dan, to yourself, to talk more about we've already covered it a little bit, the civilianisation of some roles. Has this been paused or is that still ongoing? What do we expect the numbers to look like around that in the next year?
So in terms of the budget is built on an assumption that we will hold 31,258 officers and 11,700 staff. I think 11,719 staff. I might have got that number slightly wrong, but that's what the budget's built on. As we monitor attrition and recruitment, we will look at kind of where that falls. We are not going to not take the opportunity to civilianise roles where we can. But until we see the shape of the provisional police settlement and whether those funding assumptions have been confirmed or not, it's really difficult to put those plans in place. I think civilianisation was a key part of this year's budget because of tough choice, and we recognise there were lots of officers in roles which could be filled by staff. We've done a lot of that work this year. I'm sure some of it will continue next year as we work through the settlement, but we've done a lot of that work in 25, 26, and so I don't envisage it being a really significant part of 26, 27, but of course we'd look for opportunities to civilianise where we can, because you can buy those skills cheaper than an officer and redeploy that officer.
Yeah, that's correct. We have ambitious plans for this year to civilianise 560 odd officers into staff roles. Next year, that isn't part of our plan because at the moment we're holding officer numbers steady. If we were to further civilianise, we would need funding to do that. So unless we were going to switch them out, then at the moment we're going to hold the current position where it lands.
Sorry, confirm that was 560 in the previous year, but nothing for the following year planned?
Not at this stage, no.
Okay. Is there a political choice in that at all? Because obviously it reflects, like you said, on holding numbers. Is it more about trying to keep that officer count up, or is there a good argument that it's the right thing to do?
I mean, I think for us it's about funding. So what can we afford, and what is the right balance?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to shift over to talking about savings and efficiencies. Dan, what's the impact of the Met's efficiencies programme?
In the next financial year?
Yeah. If you want to contextualise it at all, you can. But
yeah, thank you. The Met's got quite a good record of being more efficient, and to be clear, for this part of the conversation, when I talk about efficiencies, I'm talking about non-workforce efficiencies, which enable us to, in effect, do the same but with less, so sort of squeezing the inputs. So if I look at what we've done about £1 billion of efficiency over the past decade. Last year, so in the 24-25 financial year, we delivered £164 million of efficiencies. In this financial year, we're on track to deliver a further £75 million. What we've assumed for next year's budget, 26-27, is that of this year's savings, 55 million of them will be recurrent. What we've got better at is not doing it as a one-off saving and then going again. We want to do a saving that we can then baseline in, and therefore it becomes recurrent. The work that we did in order to close the budget gap for next year was based on benchmarking, and we particularly focused on certain areas of the business where we thought there might be opportunity to be more efficient. We're currently doing that work in order to have concrete plans ahead of the financial year about what those efficiencies will be and when they'll be delivered. And that 20 million efficiency in the next financial year will do two things. It will mean that of the 55 in this financial year that we deliver, with the 20 in the next financial year, we'll have £75 million of recurrent efficiencies, and that was our target. And looking at the benchmarking in the data, 3% of our non-payroll budget felt like an ambitious target. Historically, we've done 1 to 2%, and so 3% was an ambitious target that's underpinned by evidence of what we can do. You asked about risk and impact on the organisation. There will be some. That's inevitable because we have to do things differently and work in different ways and learn to prioritise better. But in doing the planning for the budget, I don't think there's anything significant or material that I draw your attention to as a result of that 20 million. There will be some impact, of course.
Okay. One of the major impacts in my local area is the closure of our front desk. And I've repeatedly asked for the figures in relation to closing that front desk. Could you provide me with those for Chingford Police Station? No, I don't. If Chingford Police Station was saving £7 million, I'd be with you, but it's not.
No, but the overall number of the change is 7 million, and obviously we've had to balance that. I think we've been asked that question before, and I think some information has been provided, but I'm looking to my right.
No, it's never been provided, and I've had meetings with senior Met leaders even this week, and they still can't give me those figures. So
okay, I'll take that away.
Everyone takes it away, and it's happening. The front counters are being closed, and I'm still asking, do we have the information on what that is saving? In my case, I'm concerned about Chingford. Other members may have been more concerned about others, but I want to know specifically at that station how much money is that saving the Met. And in the wider case of efficiencies, I'm horrified from the meetings that I've had with senior leaders where they can't provide breakdowns at stations. How can you provide great efficiency savings if we have no idea on a station level what those services are costing? If we're looking at efficiencies, we start from the bottom and work up, not a big overarching target and apply it to everywhere. That's not going to create efficiency savings in a realistic or least impactful way.
So I think we can provide those costs. That's why I will take it away.
You're going to promise me that you're going to provide me with the cost of how much closing Chingford...
We'll provide a breakdown of across the front counters. Because obviously we do know how much they're costing, because we know how many staff are each at those front counters and how they're rostered, and also how many officers
so
are used to...
How many public access officers do we have now, and what are we going down to?
Overall, or for your area?
For my area.
I can't tell you that right now, but as I said, I'll take that away and we'll provide it.
You can give it a London-wide, the public access officers that we are losing London-wide?
So that's been in the document. 1 second, I'll just get you the overall number, because it's not off the top of my head, and I don't want to give you an incorrect figure. I think we are saving... where's the front counter one? So overall, we're taking 210 officers, staff reduction.
Yeah. But can you break that down by BCU then?
No, not at this stage. I can come back to you.
Okay. Could I have a commitment then to actually get the full costings on what the closure at Chingford Police Station is going to be, of what the saving is? Is that
Yes.
a commitment?
Yes.
Okay. That might seem strange to you, but it's about the fifth commitment I've had since August.
Okay.
So I look forward to hearing more.
Apologies. Can I just clarify? Because I think off mic, a number of members of the committee are just querying exactly what it is that's being committed to. And as you say, Emma, it's not the first time we've had a commitment. So I think what we're asking for is, so we've got this total of £7 million for the savings for closing the front counters. And I think what is being asked for is, firstly, a breakdown of what that is per station that is being closed or having its hours reduced. And then secondly, I think a breakdown of how that figure is arrived at. So let's say it's X amount of money for a particular station. How is that sum derived? Is that correct? Is that what I think we're asking for? I'm seeing nodding. And not just for Chingford. I mean, Assemblymember Best is very concerned about Chingford. I think across the Assembly we're concerned about all of the stations that have been closed or reduced. So you think that that breakdown is possible and that you could send that to us?
Yes.
Yes, brilliant. Okay, excellent. Do you want to come in when Emma's...
I just want to say, I'm probably understanding why it might seem a bit confusing to you, because actually Assembly members, so for constituency members, we have had an invite alongside leaders of councils, MPs in our area, where they have actually gone through with us the details on the types of crimes in brought to that
Chair,
station.
this is an intervention that isn't relevant. I've been at every single one of those meetings. In fact, my leader hasn't gone to those meetings, but in Waltham Forest, but I have. So I've been to those meetings, Krupesh. I've asked the questions. They don't have that data.
Well, for the one that I've been to alongside fellow elected members in my constituency, we have had that presented to us. So.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, just to be clear, the objective of the committee is not to have a debate amongst the committee members. I think we're all clear that we would like that information, and if the information has already been provided, then I'm sure it will be forthwith winging its way to us again. Assemblymember Best.
I don't know if I should be more annoyed or less that other members have been told how much their station apparently is going to save, but I haven't, so that's unfortunate. But I've been in...
If it's of assistance to colleagues, I've not been told, and I'm a constituency member.
Hold on. Right, hold on. Special treatment. Stop. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. I think all members should be able to get all data, especially if they're London-wide, so I'm not sure I understand that.
Folks, come on now.
So, yeah, can we have the information, basically? And I think London-wide members should be able to have the same information for across London that they represent. Moving on to yourself, Deputy Mayor, is it realistic to expect the Met to realise a further 20 million efficiency saving, 20 million of savings in 26-27 to close the budget gap?
Yes, is the short answer. As Dan outlined, they've done well in reaching their targets previously through our active monitoring and oversight in this area. We have actually, post the last budget, increased our financial monitoring, so have regular reports and updates on where they are with the budget, moreover, and so we can track and robustly question as to the forecast budgets, as to why things might be going up or down. And so I have confidence that they can make that number.
Is there a risk assessment of not making that amount, and perhaps more to yourself?
It's a good point. There will be a risk assessment, as I think the budget document says, that at the time of budget submission, the Met was still working through the exact contents and the plan for the non-workforce efficiencies of 20 million. As Deputy Mayor has just said, their target for this financial year was 75. They've achieved the vast proportion of that. They're on track to achieve, I believe, 65, and are actually quite confident that the balance that they are currently forecasting not to achieve in this financial year, that they are still working to try and achieve it and identify plans to deliver it. We work, the financial oversight team within MOPAC works extremely closely with the Met Finance team, and we are expecting to see a breakdown of their planned savings to deliver the £20 million target. Once we receive that, we will be conducting a risk assessment and an impact assessment.
Thanks, Yvonne. Deputy Mayor, do you know, I'm presuming this further 20 million may come with a further tough choices label of what we're looking to do. Is there any lessons learned from perhaps how things have been handled previously and how you could bring these choices in a more transparent way to PCC?
My understanding is that 20 million is actually non-workforce savings, so it's definitely, I mean, I'm sure Dan would say that I'm not saying they're not difficult to realise, they are difficult to realise, but my understanding is that they're through things like contract management and things like that, not of the same level of change that we saw last year.
Okay, so we won't see any further tough choices as a result of this? And like with the context of tough choices not being perhaps as headline grabbing, I'm sure they are tough choices.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I would say we're in a different position this year. We had to make an overall saving of 450. We've really reduced that gap down. So we're in a different position. I would describe it, but Dan can give you more detail, as really working, hopefully, based on the assumptions we get from government about stabilising now.
If you don't mind me just kind of adding to the Deputy Mayor's answer, so because this financial year that we're in now was so difficult and the scale of the gap, we've been really deliberate about efficiencies which are non-pay efficiencies, contract management, kind of, and the tough choices are really how we've reduced the headcount. And we talked about a couple of examples of those today. The assumption in next year's budget, ahead of the provisional police settlement, is that we would hold workforce and therefore we would not require any tough choices. Of course, because we don't know what the settlement will be, we are doing some scenario planning. If the funding doesn't come through, we may need to look at workforce reduction that would mean some tough choices. That's not the assumption that we've made in the MOPAC publication. So I'd hope not to, but it's reliant on the income coming through next week when we see the settlement.
Thanks. Assembly Member Baker.
Hi, my question's for Dan. It's on the same themes as we've been discussing, but very specifically, we've been talking about recurring efficiency savings in the budget, and obviously future years there are going to be required further efficiency savings, further budget savings in future years. How likely is this going to mean that there are further tough choices? I suppose do we categorise those as ones that might impact frontline services? Is that how you'd categorise those? Apologies for not being on PCC. So how likely is that budget gap will result in further tough choices?
I'm not sure I can quantify likelihood. What I can tell you is that policing would really benefit from a multi-year settlement. And we don't have that. So we only ever have funding information for the 12 months that come. So it's really hard to plan beyond that, but of course we do. Dependent on the provisional police settlement and what happens in 26-27, that'll inform the scale of the gap, the financial gap in the final 2 years of the Parliament. So this is where I always get my years wrong, but 28-20, I got it wrong, 27-28 and 28-29. I'd imagine there will be a gap in those years, subject to the funding settlements that we get. We will work really hard, as we have done for the past couple of years, to protect our operational workforce, because that's how we drive performance and service. And that means us being more efficient. If you don't mind me adding kind of a separate point to your question, one of the things that's in the budget is an investment in what we've called precision policing, because what we want to do is get better at the use of AI and automation and all those things in order to be more productive, and therefore to realise some of those savings, because we can do more with less by deploying technology well. And that will be a key part of our toolkit for any future budget gaps, dependent on what those settlements are. It would be really nice for policing to have medium-term certainty and a multi-year settlement, so we could project out more. We're just not in a position to do that at the moment.
Understood. I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Just before we move on from this section, just wanted to, thinking back, Kaya, to a comment you were making, we were talking about officer numbers. There was a discussion about total officer numbers, and then you were also talking about numbers of officers in neighbourhood policing roles. Do you have the total officers in neighbourhood policing roles now, and also what that total was last year, last May, which I think we're using as the baseline?
Yes, I do. Hold on. Let me make sure I give you the correct numbers. We got them up. Thank you. So we started the year with 2,554 police officers in neighbourhoods. We've gone up by 420, so that's 2,974.7. And then for PCSOs, we started at 966.9, and we've gone up by 50 officers, so we've got 1,016.9.
Thank you very much. And is there an ambition for what that should be, or is it that?
So by the end of the year, we're hoping to add an additional 500 for this year.
Okay.
By the end of the financial year.
Got you. Thank you very much. So we now move on to looking at the New Met for London Phase 2. Assemblymember Garbett.
Thank you. So speaking to the New Met for London Phase 2 that was published yesterday, I just wanted to ask a question to the Deputy Mayor just on what the key changes were between the consultation document in the summer and the document that came out yesterday. Just some high level and just an understanding of how costed the New Met for London 2 is, or how much additional funding there's needed to deliver the commitments within it.
So I know that you're highlighting away the differences. You've got the documents in front of you. But I would say overall, the New Met for London 2 is called New Met for London 2 for a reason. It's not a completely different plan. It builds on the need to increase crime fighting, increase standards, increase trust and confidence. And the budget, therefore, reflects that. Obviously, cultural reform continues to be a priority. So we've got £63 million to deliver New Met for London overall, and with a capital section of that being 65 million, and I think we're going to come on to questions around that later on, so unless you want me to give that. So basically the short answer in terms of is New Met for London budgeted, yes. I've got a whole breakdown of the budget in front of me, but we've got obviously lines around professionalism, criminal exhibits, which, as we've discussed in PCC.
So I think,
before.
and I think, you know, what's been alluded to by other Assembly members as well is that obviously we had the New Met for London 1 that made a number of commitments that then some of them weren't delivered, and that's been my frustration between New Met for London 1 and 2, that it's not really clear, because the annex still just has we did all this stuff, rather than there's some things that we didn't do, things like the front counters or the commitment to kind of for communities to be a Met-wide priority. So I do think it's just, I mean, we've heard your commitment there that it is funded, so that states that the things in there will be delivered, and I appreciate that it's got the timelines in it now. I did want to ask about, so protest policing has been spoken about here. It's mentioned like briefly in New Met for London 2, even though everyone talks about it being a huge pressure and priority. So I just wondered if there's any conversations that you're having about how the Met could police protests differently and therefore not require as much central government funding. So we know that other cities aren't policing protests in the same way. So I'm just wondering if there's been any reflection on that, rather than just continuing to increase the amount of policing for protest.
Just to give you some assurance, Assembly Member Garbett, on your first point, we've actually asked that the Metropolitan Police Service publish a dashboard on New Met for London 2, so we'll be able to have clearer monitoring and tracking on that. So I think that information might be of use to you. On public order, obviously the budget includes that. We've got 9.17 attributed to that. What I would say is public order, for all of the reasons we've rehearsed many times, is different in London because of the context. So looking at public order alone is difficult because we have very diverse neighbourhoods. We have different things happening. I don't think I'll ever forget the weekend of the United Kingdom march, for example. We had 7 Premier League football teams in London at the same time. So
I guess I'm more talking about people holding signs and sitting quietly. In some cities, they have chosen not to arrest people, whereas the Metropolitan Police have put a lot of resource into that. So I just wondered if there's a reflection in this period of budget setting about that approach.
I mean, I think we'll always reflect on what we can do differently. And as Dan said earlier, we're looking at, what technology might bring in terms of the difference in policing. However, I think the police, especially in terms of public order, have to police to the letter of the law, and that's what they've done.
Okay, I think obviously we've heard this today that there's many things that are against the law that have been chosen to be deprioritised. So I do think we hear a kind of confliction between when we police the law and when we don't police the law. But yeah.
I think the things that you're talking about, though, do come under specific counter-terrorism legislation. So I would say that that's a different.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just talking about how we compare ourselves to other cities. But to move on to another point, the money that's set aside for culture, is there a point that we constantly reviewing the amount of funding that's being put into culture, and is there a point that we decide that there's, like what level of funding are we going to keep putting into the Metropolitan Police to improve culture?
I mean, I've got the budget in front of me. We've got culture at, it has its own distinct line at 0.42, but then also, for example, there's another line on 2.86 on firearm culture. What I would say, moreover, and then obviously it's in professionalism and vetting as well. What I would say, moreover, and this is the point about culture, isn't it, is that culture cannot be, and this is something that we have ongoing active conversations with the London Policing Board and the Metropolitan Police Service. Culture can't be, should be in every line. It can't be something that is held in a particular budget line or a particular department. It might be that a particular department is driving that throughout the organisation, but it has to be in all we do when we talk about standards and culture.
Thank you. And just finally, earlier this year, the Mayor released the Drug Commission, which obviously, and you and the Mayor committed to the recommendation that would move the policing of cannabis into the cannabis into the Psychoactive Substances Act, which obviously would change the way that it was policed in the city. So I just wondered if you've done any modelling around the impact that would have on policing numbers and therefore the budget required for that sort of policing, and what conversations you're having about that.
I'd need to come back with specific details on modelling and numbers, but we are actively working through the London Drugs Forum, which the police sit on those recommendations.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see that, because I know there's some national modelling around kind of how much money that would save in terms of police activity, so it'd be good to see that for London. Thank you.
Assembly Member Mahfouz. Thank you, and good morning. So we've got the new Met for London 2 document, which has just been released. Clearly, one of the things that you want to achieve is in terms of rebuilding trust with the police. You want to reduce crime at the same time. And one of the things that you've done since you met us last time as a budget was that you've introduced new community teams in specific town centre areas, like mine in Ealing Broadway. And clearly putting more police officers into the front line in those safer neighbourhoods is a key priority. In order to make them as effective as possible, one of the things that you're seeking to do is to make sure that they've got local bases within 20-minute walk of their wards. How does the plan that we've got in front of us seek to achieve that?
Marie might want to come in on specifics, but that would be through our capital work. It is something that we can't achieve alone. We have been talking to local authority leaders and others, and we've had some great examples of those community hubs being realised alongside local authorities, but also, for example, retail, private sector spaces as well. So we are working through that investment ambition, but it's not something that we can achieve alone, and we're working through the challenges and barriers of what it might take to get us there.
So how developed are those proposals at the moment from a budgeting point of view? So if we are to be co-hiring space, clearly capital needs to go in there to make sure it meets the Met's requirements in terms of security, etc. Across London, how many ward teams have been planned for within the forthcoming year?
So I don't have the specifics, and some of it will be contained in the estate strategy. But clearly, as we develop the estate strategy and the capital plan, we've looked at what do we need to meet the requirements and what's affordable and what's not affordable. So the budget aligns to the thinking and the plans that are in place. The estate strategy will do the detail on ward bases and whatnot. But to confirm to your question, the budget and the strategy and New Met for London are aligned.
So if there was a KPI of number of SNT, Safer Neighbourhood teams that were within this 20-minute walking distance, what percentage would be at now, and where do we hope to be in a year's time?
I mean, the ambition is obviously for all of them to have that. I think from memory, 120 are in that space at the moment. So we know we have further to go. And as Dan said, that's what we're working through in terms of mapping that out in the upcoming estate strategy.
Okay, I mean, obviously we're going to come back to the estate strategy, and I don't want to step on colleagues' toes just yet. But it would be really good to get an indication as early as possible as to, well, certainly where that baseline is now and where this budget takes us to going forward. I'm going to move to one of my favourite subjects and declare an interest as somebody who's been to Premier League games during the 2024-25 season. In the current document, you state that it costs the Met Police £19 million to police Premier League football games in London, and you recover £5 million. So the first question is just to clarify, is the £19 million gross or net?
Gross.
Gross. Okay, so the cost to Londoners is £14 million net in terms of, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So as a percentage of extra precept, that would be equivalent about 1.4% extra if we were to recover that from Londoners across the board, right? Whereas if you break that down by the number of attendees at football games, that would be about an extra £2.50 per ticket that we are currently subsidising as Londoners. So if you take the 14 million, divide that by about 5.5 million tickets that are sold across London's Premier League games during that season, it would be an extra £2.50 that we're subsidising every time I or anybody else goes to a football match or Premier League match in London. How are we looking to close that gap that we currently have, first of all?
I think Dan might want to come in on the work that we've been working with the National Police Chiefs Council on the rate card and the importance of being able to have a rate card that looks at full cost recovery. That's primarily the way we're looking at that. Dan, do you want to add on that?
We're actively engaged with the Home Office on. So, to the Deputy Mayor's point, we've moved to a situation where we're closer to full cost recovery than we have been in the past. That's a good thing for the Met, it's a good thing for London. Specifically on Premier League, I was desperately trying to do the maths, but I've not got the attendance figures that kind of in my head. We are working with the Home Office as they seek to explore this through the NPCC on, I'll call it full cost recovery for football, and how that might be delivered. As I understand it, there are options on the table, but I don't think any decisions have been made.
So those discussions happen between the Home Office and the Premier League nationally, not at a local level then?
We're engaged to the extent that to articulate the impact on London. I can't really answer your question on behalf of the Home Office, sorry.
Kaya, do you want to add anything in terms of representations?
Yeah, I mean, we're very clear on the level of need in terms of footballing in London. Obviously, that's not to say I also feel guilty as a football fan that football doesn't bring a hell of a lot of positivity and economic growth to the city as well. So that's obviously part of the mix, but we want to be making sure that where possible that we are getting full cost recovery.
So where are we at the moment in terms of the assumptions that have gone into the budget ahead of us? So that 40 million net gap, we assume that it goes down? Does it go up?
Broadly, it holds. We've budgeted on the basis of the current frameworks and current legislation, and so that's included in the budget, unless and until that can change.
And just moving away from football, obviously London, we host a number of other festivals, big events, music and others. How does it work in terms of the rate card you're referring to there, Kaya, in terms of full cost recovery for those events? How does that compare?
I mean, I think, and the legislation says that wherever possible we should be going for full cost recovery. Obviously, we understand that there's a balance to be had in that. Obviously, we host some amazing events and festivals, and for example the London Marathon, which is a charitable event, so we need to be able to adapt accordingly.
So just when we say Taylor Swift, some of those much bigger musical events that we host in London, how close are we to full cost recovery? Do we get full cost recovery on those, or is that how close are we if we don't?
So under the current framework, we don't get full cost recovery because it's really based on the chargeable footprint of the event. I don't have specific event by event details, but the lobbying and the influencing is about how do we affect legislation and the frameworks in order to put the police in a better funded position. We are not at full cost recovery now for pop concerts for Premier League. That's, as I understand it, what the Home Office is considering.
So in order to close that gap, we've got to have calculated what the gap is, right? So have you got those figures to hand, if not necessarily today, but something that you could share with the committee?
Sorry, just so I understand, which gap?
The full cost recovery. So you're saying in terms of, so we're giving data, information to the Home Office so that they can have conversations with the Premier League. They're also looking at what the full cost recovery should look like in terms of that rate card. So therefore you should know what the gap is between what we're currently recovering from big events like that and where we would want to be.
Do you mean all big, sorry, just to clarify, do you mean all big events, or do you mean football? Are you segmenting
Well, I'm saying,
those events?
so Premier League, I've just given you the data, right? Easy to calculate. It's a headline thing. We keep on talking about it. I've got the figures. It's basically £2.50 per ticket, right? As of last season. Do you have those figures for any of the big major concerts, for example?
Not to hand. Clearly, we plan out our year based on what we know and when events come on schedule, and then we look at the operational and financial impact on that. I could certainly write with more specific details than are set out in the budget and the underpinning work, but the modelling happens to inform the budget to make sure we can meet operational demand. I just don't have the specifics in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously from today's point of view, we're looking at it from the financial impact. So it'd be really good to understand what impact it does have on the finances by not having that full cost recovery, what that gap we're looking to close should be, and especially when it could be equivalent, we're talking about just the Premier League alone, of another 1.4% on or not on the policing precept, or that 1.4% could go to something else if we got that money in. So it's really important that we have an understanding of where private sector should be stepping up, and I appreciate there will be a differential between those big events at Wembley and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, for example, versus the London Marathon and other events being organised by charities.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really why we really need to push additionally for the NIC as well, because that's a kind of overall pot that recognises and push the NIC fund, although taking Mana's point about that coming out of court policing, does become the norm for London to receive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks. Assemblymember Garbett.
Thank you. Just some quick questions on this. Obviously, we've seen good work done with Notting Hill Carnival around what stewards do versus what police officers do. So first question is, how much conversations are you actually having with the venues and festivals about the roles that stewards could do instead of the police, e.g. crowd control? And the other point is, I think this is a bit of a slippery slope, and I am actually quite worried about it, because obviously you could end up with a point where you're charging shops around the high street because of the policing and the crime that they attract due to shoplifting. So I think I find this discussion a little bit worrying, because I feel like it kind of starts to stray into different, fundamentally changes our model of policing. So just a question on stewarding, and then what are you ensuring to just make sure that we don't end up in that position that we just start questioning everything?
Overall, what I would say is I've never known an event that hasn't had a lot of especially significant pre-event work with the police and the stadium operator on stewarding and the levels of stewarding needed. Obviously, one of the great things about being London is we're quite used to having huge events, so there are definite kind of strategies in place.
What I'm pushing is, could we try and push for more stewarding before we just, dismantle the whole model, and look at different ways of doing the policing element of some of these events and replace it with stewarding?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, every event is actively looked in that, and I would say, obviously, different events have different levels of risk associated with them, and that's all negotiated with the police. So it might well be that a event is deemed to be lower risk, and therefore more stewarding can take over some of those checks going in and out of a stadium, to give an example, versus a different event needing a different thing. To reassure you on your second point, Assembly Member Garbett, I think we need to be very clear that cost recovery is only one way the police get funded. A significant way that the police get funded is obviously through national government and local business rates and others. So I can't see a world in which we would be asking, because they already pay their taxes.
The private space versus the space near the private area, and when that stops, and I do think there is a world where someone could apply it to a high street. Is just my concern.
Okay.
Is it really, really quick? Good. Okay. I'm very conscious that the Deputy Mayor needs to leave shortly, but before that, I just want to very quickly move on to the next section, which is about capital delivery in estates. I think we can squeeze in a question or two before the Deputy Mayor needs to leave.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, we've not been afforded sight of the estate strategy, unlike the London Policing Board, and we're having a special meeting about that next week. In terms of the estates themselves and buildings in particular, will we be disposing of buildings as part of the estate strategy?
As I said at the previous PCC meeting earlier this month, or was it last month now, that we are in the last stages of publishing the estate strategy, which will have that detail in it.
But, I mean, it's a yes or no. Will we be disposing of buildings as part of the estate strategy?
In what year? There's various variables within the thing. So, as I said, at the last PCC, the estate strategy is weeks away from being published. I'm very happy to have a full session. I said that to the chair on the estate strategy, if that's what Assembly members would have, so that we can go through all of the
But Deputy Mayor, we're here scrutinising your budget today, and the capital is playing a very large part of your budget here, and it would have been helpful for us to have had sight of the estate strategy so we could have made informed comment on it as part of this thing. So there are going to be disposals. We don't know when they're going to be disposals, but there are going to be disposals. How much are you setting aside within your budget for the maintenance and upkeep and repair of buildings which are surplus to requirements? So that's a revenue cost. How much are you going to be putting aside in your budget for that?
So Do you want to? I've got the investment in our property services is going to make up 0.4 billion pounds of the 1.4 billion
that's across the
capital
piece,
programme.
I'm sure. That's across the entire estate, not the ones which you're hoping to dispose of.
Oh, okay. Well, no, we wouldn't.
Okay, so I mean, the reason why I ask is that, for example, Teddington Police Station in my area, since it was closed in 2017, there's been a cost to the taxpayer, as unearthed by my colleague Minerva Wilson, of £195,473.98. It's a considerable amount of money which is being spent on empty, dilapidated and derelict buildings. So surely you should be wanting to get rid of them as quickly as possible, and you should have an idea of how much the upkeep of these soon-to-be disposed of buildings is within your current budget. Would you not suggest?
And when we have the estate strategy, I'm happy to go through that example.
Okay, it would have been helpful to be able to discuss it here, but there we are. I'm conscious of the Deputy Mayor's time, and there are detailed questions which may be better placed to Dan. So if you wish to go to the break now, Chair, that will be...
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we'll take a short adjournment of about 5 minutes while we change over the panels and Ms. May wish to have a short comfort break. So I'll make it 12:03, so we will resume at 12:08. Thanks, everyone. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to today's Budget and Performance Committee, where we resume asking the Met and MOPAC about capital funding and the estate strategy. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. This is a question for Dan, and it's fairly straightforward. What is the financial impact on the 2026-27 budget of the draft estates strategy, as much as you can tell us about the draft estate strategy, of course?
So as we've developed the estate strategy, we've aligned the budget to it. Set out in the capital budget for next year is 100 million of expenditure on the estate out of the total capital programme. That has a revenue impact because we have to both maintain properties and we also have to service the debt because we don't have a capital grant, so we have to borrow to invest capitally. The budget includes 100 million of estates capital provision.
Okay, thank you. Just on the question I was asking the Deputy Mayor earlier regarding the disposable properties, there was a disposals list which was published, I think it was 2021, I might be wrong, which had 16 police stations or pieces of property listed, including, I think, Chiswick, Teddington, things like that. And there was an estimate that the annual maintenance bill for those buildings alone was about £4.8 million. Without wishing to, have hashtag spoilers for the estate strategy, is that a figure which you still recognise in terms of disposable buildings maintenance?
It's not a figure that I recognise, and I don't have that level of detail. I'm happy to take it away to look at the level of spend on vacant properties, if that would help. But that's not a figure I don't have that detail to hand.
Yeah, if we could get that sort of level of detail on vacant properties and right back to us as a committee, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And second question is the 2025-26 capital expenditure budget is forecast to be underspent. And so how's the Met's record of consistently underspending against this capital programme influenced your budget plans for 2026-27?
So the 2 years talk to each other. So if I parked financial years, the capital budget won't be underspent. We will spend what we plan to spend on the programmes we plan to spend it on. The point at which I can capitalise the cost and therefore borrow to fund it depends on where the programme's up to. So the vast majority of the forecast underspend in this financial year is because the work sometimes hasn't gone as quickly as we planned. There will be delays. There will be different things that we actively monitor. The upside of a forecast capital underspend is we don't borrow as much. But clearly we will still complete the work as part of the capital programme. So those areas which might be delayed or delivered later have been built into the 26-27 capital plan to take account of the 25-26 underspend.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And if I could take a moment, I'd just like to welcome Lib Peck, who joined us on the panel for the second part of our meeting this morning, who's the Director of the London Violence Reduction Unit. Afternoon, Lib. We now continue with Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Dan, just a quick follow-up question on the estate strategy and whether it will include what work the MPS is doing on climate adaptation and how climate risks are being captured by the Met and what work's being done around that and how that's costed.
I don't really want to kind of comment on a strategy that's yet to be published, but in developing the strategy, clearly we've been thinking about kind of decarbonising the estate electrification of the fleet. That is set out in the draft estate strategy that's just going through the clearance process. So I think in answer to your question, yes, it will be in there, but we want to get the document published so
reassurance
you can
that it is in there, that's great. And just around making sure that the buildings are, not overheating and all of those considerations. The other question I wanted to quickly ask that's kind of related to New Met for London 2 but also Capital is around I've never been able to get a clear understanding of the budget spent on facial recognition technology, either capital or revenue, and I just really struggle to find a specific cost for the tech, for the resources used, the human resources, and I don't know if that's something that can be provided.
Happy to take that away. So some of it is in the New Met for London Phase 1 budget, both capital and revenue. And then one of the things that we did at the end of the 24-25 financial year, because we'd started to forecast an underspend, we invested in a couple of performance areas subject to governance, and live facial recognition was one of those. So we can write back with the specifics on that technology.
Yeah, because that would be amazing. That would be really good to understand how that's been phased. And then, yeah, just an estimate of what a deployment costs in terms of human resources, because I know there's like people sat in the van, there's like sometimes 6 officers kind of using the... Yeah, so it'd be good to understand what a kind of an estimate of the deployment cost. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, I know you're not going to divulge what's in the estate strategy, but is there at least recognition from the Mayor and the Mayor that over the last 4 years, if you know what you know now, that there wouldn't be a positive financial impact if we had the estate strategy earlier on?
It's quite a hard question to answer, which is why I'm pausing.
That's my job.
Reflect. The MOPAC, the Met, is keen to publish an estate strategy, and we're really pleased that we're within a couple of weeks of doing that. We're really careful on value for money, and we're really conscious that we don't have a capital grant. And so, in effect, for every amount that we borrow, in effect, part of the Met pound goes on servicing that debt. So we are really focused on prioritisation, risk assessment, kind of where we spend on the estate. I don't think the plans that we've delivered on the estate and capital over the past 4 years would be materially different to what we would have delivered if an estate strategy was in place, because we're doing the same thing about the best use of resourcing to protect an estate that's dilapidated and needs invested in and needs maintaining. But it's hard to kind of prove a counterfactual because we've not had the estate strategy. But what we have been doing is delivering a plan that aligns to the estate strategy that we've drafted and, in line with our responsibilities, offers value for money to the taxpayer.
Well, with the greatest respect, I don't really see how the leadership of the Metropolitan Police and the Mayor of London can take that particular view. And I'll give you some examples. And I'll take one borough at random, the London Borough of Enfield. So if we look at Enfield Town, Sadiq Khan closed that police station, is sitting there dormant. You know, it's worth millions. If we look at Winchmore Hill Police Station, which is closed, sitting dormant, nothing going on. If we look at Southgate Police Station, it turned into a cannabis factory and only now has become a bunch of HMOs that nobody wants. The only exception to this, and this was actually under the Boris Johnson mayoralty, and I'm not quite sure who was the police commissioner then, Ponders End Police Station, which was closed, has now been developed into flats, so at least that one was off the books and made a return on investment. So I struggle to see how we think that, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth and you can correct me, but this delay in the estate strategy has been nothing but bad for your reserves and for future investment in police stations that are staying open.
So that's not what I said. What I said was that with a scarce capital resource, we've used that really carefully. Maintaining vacant police stations costs money. And we have spent that because we have a duty to make sure the building is safe, and that's what we've done over the past couple of years with those vacant properties. The estate strategy will set out the plan for the next 10 years, and we look forward to publishing that.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is we've been promised the estate strategy year on year on year. We're now 4 years late, and I'll give you the examples once again. I'll give you 2 in particular. Enfield Town Police Station. Unless it's being invested in and reopened, which I hope it would be in the estate strategy, but I find it unlikely, that's been dormant for years. If we look at Winchmore Hill Station, which was closed before that one's been dormant for years. And these are properties worth millions. So I don't... Teddington's another good example. So the point I'm trying to make is I do not understand how this delay has not had a negative effect on our finances. I mean, you're hardly in the position to turn down an easy 20 mil from one borough alone.
Just to repeat a point that Dan has made, the absence of the estate strategy has not prevented us taking operational decisions regarding the Met's estate and Mopac's estate. The strategy, as you'll see hopefully in a few weeks' time, is a visionary document. It sets out the vision over the next 10 years regarding the Met Mopac estate. To your point about the delay, there has been a delay. The delay has been driven by multiple external factors. So the first main driver of the delay was the previous government's police officer uplift programme that indicated that nationally there would be an increase of 10,000 officers, specifically for the Met 6,000. Were that to happen, an increase in workforce, the operational workforce of 6,000 required the Commissioner to think about the adequate estate required for an increase of 6,000 officers. There was then the Mayor's review by Lord Kerslake into affordable housing in London. That also required, it necessitated a pause in the Met's publication of the estate strategy. There was then a change in Commissioner and a new Commissioner's development of the reform programme, New Met for London. So all of these are examples of very real, tangible factors that have contributed to the delay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to quantify that because since the government, and if I remember correctly, it was the Boris Johnson government in the 2019 manifesto that committed to the extra 10,000 police officers. Where are we now? 2025, nearly 2026. And that was a December election. So really we're looking at 6 years ago. And we've held off primarily as one of the factors for that reason. Basically in the hope that we're going to get additional police officers over successive governments, which, as clearly in London, it hasn't transpired. And actually, with respect to the Mayor of London, you know, he's promised an extra 1,300. We've seen a net reduction in 2,630. So it really hasn't materialised. So using that as a reason, Amana, I don't quite follow the logic, but I appreciate what you're saying is part of a whole basket of factors. Fine. Okay, I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay. Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues are probably quite bored of me asking the same question at each of these meetings, but I'll ask it anyway. It is to do with net zero 2030 versus 2050. Obviously, the Mayor has committed to 2030 rather than the legally binding target of 2050. I'm just keen to understand what additional financial pressures this places, both revenue and capital, whether there are pressures that would be less pressured if we were only to aim for 2050 rather than 2030. Thank you.
So the budget that we've got borrows money to fund our capital programme. The estate strategy will set out, to the extent that it's it will set out the vision, and to the extent that it's affordable, it will talk about the things that we can do to green the estate around the electrification of the fleet and the infrastructure that we need, and some of the work on our buildings. And that's something that the document will contain when we publish it.
But I guess the pace at which those things are done, I think, is surely influenced by that ultimate deadline. I'm just conscious that in one of your previous answers you said that you're really careful on value for money. I'd just like to understand to what extent, say, by going for 2030, hell for leather, what extra pressure it creates.
If I could come in our published budget, the budget that was published on the 21st of November, there is a table B. This explains a series of unfunded and unaffordable climate measures. So I think that answers your question. These are specific project-level initiatives that would allow us to achieve sustainability targets, but which are not currently funded and we're not currently proceeding with due to lack of funding.
Thank you.
Okay. Assembly Member Georgiou, looking at reserves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So to Dan, how will the reliance on limited reserves to fund ongoing expenditure be addressed in 26-27?
So the budget does not rely on a general reserves draw in 26-27. we topped up our general reserve at the end of the last financial year, and it's now sitting at £75 million, which is 1.9% of our net revenue expenditure. And that's our contingency reserve, our kind of resilience reserve. The budget will draw down on our earmarked reserves, where we have earmarked monies for planned pieces of expenditure for specific purposes. And so they will be spent during the course of the year as set out in the budget papers. They're for specific things, and so to sustain and afford the organisation on an ongoing basis, we are not reliant on reserves. We are reliant on the annual funding that we get from core grant, special grant and precept.
And what are the risks with the plans to reduce reserves balance to 128 million by the end of 28-29? And I hear what you say, that you're only really drawing down earmarked reserves at the moment, but I'll come back to non-earmarked in a moment. So do you want to comment on that?
So the main risk is that our general reserve, we'd like to have it between 2 to 3% of net revenue expenditure. And of course, as our expenditure keeps inflating, getting to 2% will require topping up that reserve. I was about to say we're comfortable. I am comfortable at 1.9% as the general reserve. It is under the 2 to 3% threshold. And so I don't think there is more risk. But what we have got to do to put the Met on a sustainable footing to withstand pressures that we can't foresee is have an adequate level of reserve. And the strategy sets out an aspiration to take that close to 125 million. We clearly don't want to do that in a shrinking organisation because we want to prioritise performance in the front line. And so earmarked reserves, you said you'll come on to, are a different thing. Our general reserve level is acceptable. It could be higher, but we'd rather focus those funds elsewhere rather than topping up the reserve. If it's okay, I'll just see if Amana's got anything to add, because if the reserves don't sit with the Met, they do sit with MOPAC.
I would just add that we have made a sustained and intentional effort to increase our general reserve balance. So at the end of 22-23, our general reserve balance was 46.6 million. At the end of 25-26, it's forecast to be 76.6 million, and that's due to intentional allocations into the general reserve at the end of the year where we've had underspends. That's an increase within a short period of time of over 60%. So our reserve strategy sets out, exactly as Dan has said, that the best practice that CIPFA set out is a general reserve balance of 2 to 3%. We're currently at 1.9. To get to 2% from the 1.9 would require a further investment of just short of £5 million, based on the net revenue expenditure for 28-29, which is the period that we're looking at. Dan and I have conversations throughout the day, week, year, but in relation to this, we are very mindful of looking at in-year performance and talking about, should there be a reversal of the current forecast for this financial year? The current forecast is actually an overspend. Should that reverse as the year continues and an underspend materialises, we'll be having a conversation about whether it's appropriate at that time to put any of that underspend into the general reserve.
I think my concern, I mean, and by the way, I appreciate CIPFA guidance has changed drastically over the last year in particular, so I know that it's probably not made life easier for you guys. But I think 1.9% is somewhat of an arbitrary figure, although it is close to the 2 to 3%, so I recognise that, and it would only require an extra 5 million to get to the 2%. We'll round up, it's okay. However, I think what we're finding with a lot of local government organisations, and I appreciate the Met is in a completely different ball game, but even if you use TfL as a comparator, we are always with reserves at where they are, non-earmarked reserves, and of course your earmarked reserves are forecast to be at 51.5 million in 28-29, which is only around the corner, and I think we're forecasting, so 70, Amana, you said rightly, that 76.6 million is where we're at the moment, and forecast to remain the same over the coming years. The problem is with the way, you take the national insurance increases. There's a whole host of factors, market conditions, prudential borrowing limits, things like that. We're one bad year away from a bad year. if that makes sense. And what we're finding with a lot of local government is that they've expended their reserves. This is why we're seeing a lot of them go bust. I know that the Met, given it is the Met, is in a very different financial situation, that it becomes increasingly difficult to go bust, which is obviously a good thing. But is the concern not there that effectively, I know you want to increase non-earmarked reserves in the general fund, but that actually that one bad year, could you just give us a worst case scenario? Not saying this is going to happen, but what in your careers in the Met and MOPAC, what has been the biggest drawdown that you've seen in reserves over that time? And we'll just use that as a benchmark for a bad year.
I'll go back to the start of your question
Sure.
and then come on to the end. Kind of not to declare, but kind of the job before this I worked at SITFA, so I'm really familiar with their guidance. It's qualitative, and so it's for the individual Section 151 officers to produce a Section 25 statement about the adequacy of reserves in their professional judgment, and we have many good and robust conversations about that, and get to a good position. I think the thing that I'd reflect back is the demand pressure and the cost pressure in local government is different to policing. 80% of our cost is payroll. Now, there are some variables in that. We've got overtime, there are different things. We've talked a lot about protest. But the landscape is different from local government that does have a more demand-led cost space, in my opinion. And so local government Section 151 officers will take a different review on adequacy of reserves. In my view, and based on the work that we've done together, I'm comfortable with a general reserve of 2 to 3% in line with the MOPAC reserve strategy. I'd be more comfortable if that could grow, but I'd be really conscious we'd be taking that money away from the red line, from the front line, to put into a reserves pot, and that's not our strategy about driving performance and driving community policing. So, I mean, I'd love the 4.6 million. I'd love to say to you I'm at 2%, we're at 1.9%. And I'm comfortable with that, and that's what's behind the Section 25 statement in the consultation budget. The other thing I'd reflect, and again, Amana might want to build or comment, the Met's done quite a lot of earmarking over its time for specific things. And as we've strengthened our grip on our finances, our grip on our forecasting, we've really looked at those earmarks, because what we want to do is make sure there's not money sat there that we could be using for other purposes. And so, in a way, I'm pleased the earmark reserves are coming down, because we are spending them on the intended purpose. And then you get to a clearer position on resilience and kind of what could damage that resilience, which should rely on the general reserve rather than the earmark reserve. And so, in a shrinking organisation with a tough spending review settlement and without the funding that we'd want to grow, we talked about 38,000 officers before, I'm about as comfortable as I can be in terms of the level of general reserves, and that we will deliver the plans to spend down on the earmark reserves that have sat there for quite a long time, some of them, over the next 3 years.
Just if I can pick, I know Amana, you want to come in. Just if I could just pick up on one point that you made. Effectively, yes, you would like to increase the general reserves, but not at the cost of frontline services. However, let's square that circle where, as you've rightly identified, 80% of your spend is frontline services, effectively, or staff pay and contributions. But if we look at, so 21-22 to 22-23, we had a drawdown in the general reserves of 12.2 million, right? Now, if you want to stay close, which I assume you do, to the SITFA guidance amount that you should keep in general reserves, if we had another bad year, let's say the worst year over the last, under 10 years, let's use that as a benchmark, 12.2 million, you've got a choice to make. Is that going to come out of the general fund, which puts you at risk of a further bad year, which who knows what will happen over the coming years, or do you take that out of frontline services? So do you see what I mean? It's that we're at that danger level at the moment. I appreciate you're comfortable with where we are, but how are you going to determine that at the time? I'm not asking you to get your crystal ball out, but the choice will be, do we take away 12.2 million from frontline services in the Met, or do we take it from reserves and risk a further bad year?
So I'm conscious. I'm going to give you a hypothetical answer but I think it's. Last year when we sat here, we talked a lot about where did the 450 million gap that became 260 million, where did that come from? And the Met across the kind of 2010s drew down on its reserves to balance the books. And we got to a position for the 1st of April this year where we couldn't do that anymore. We were at 2%, it can't go any lower. And so that's why we talked before about the scenario planning. And if the funding that we've assumed doesn't come through in a provisional police settlement, we've got some scenario plans that may lead to further tough choices and therefore workforce shrinkage. We have to get a provisional police settlement to see where that is. I don't think there's an option, if I were to stick to the statutory guidance, and Amana would hold my feet to the fire on that, for us to plug any of those gaps on a recurrent basis from general reserves. The reserves just are not there. And if you look at the Met's level of reserves across, comparatively to other urban forces, ours are a lot lower than colleagues kind of in Manchester and Birmingham and elsewhere. So the Met's resilience in terms of reserves is not there, which is why we've had to reduce by 1,700 FTE this financial year, because that was the only way that we could live within our financial means. The last point I'd make is, in a world where we get single-year settlements, and we will need to understand this time next year what the profile of that 1.7% looks like. There could be scenarios where you borrow out of reserves in the short term, because if you've got a funding issue in year 2, but you know that you've got more money in year 3, you might use that to smooth. Now, I'd have to agree that with my colleague at MOPAC. And so there is some stuff where I think we should be ambitious and we should be really cognizant of the front line where you might want to deploy reserves, but they be specific things, very short term, so you could pay back to the 2%. But I don't have a crystal ball, but kind of trying to think out loud about the type of scenario where we would see those reserves used. I think they'd be very, very. There's very few scenarios where I would even contemplate using them, and even if we were to use them, it would have to be short term so that we could pay them back. I hope that answers your question.
No, that does. Thank you. I don't know if Amana briefly wants to.
I'm just conscious I've got one more section, so I want to make sure we allow enough time for. So our final section is on the Mayor's Office of Policing Crime and the Violence Reduction Unit. Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, panel. My question is to Amana. So, Amana, what are the 2.3 million pounds of MOPAC growth items? What will they deliver, and how were they selected? So, what are the growth items, delivery, and what selection criteria was used?
Could I just ask where you're referring to, Assembly Member Desai?
Well, the briefing note says that the MOPAC has plans as a growth agenda of 2.3 million pounds.
So overall, within the MOPAC budget, there is a structural deficit. The position that we published back in March was a structural deficit of 4.2 million, and our budget that we published on the 21st of November proposes for that to be closed, and we have a savings plan that closes that gap.
Well, I'm not getting so unless something is wrong in my briefing, it specifically talks about growth items. I'll revisit the briefing again. But
that might be something that we need to go. Is it specifically me or you?
I can clarify if we're talking about the violence reduction unit, but I couldn't quite catch the beginning of the question, so I'm not sure that was
well, it's
the
not
case.
about the one. It's about MOPAC in general. That there are.
Oh, MOPAC in general.
Yeah.
No, I can talk.
I know there's a question for you later, which will be asked by someone else. Well, either something's wrong with the briefing that I've been given.
Mate, yeah, I'll just. So what we've been told is that the draft budget for next year includes MOPAC savings of 4.6 million, growth items of 2.3, and reserve funding of 2.1.
Thank you.
There are, apologies, it might just be use of the term growth. So in the 26-27 position for MOPAC, there are some exceptional costs, and they are new. So I suppose you could call them growth items. So I'll give you an example of one. Just to try to answer the totality of your question, you talk about what criteria was used. The example I'm going to give you is a cost that we are facing in 26-27, which is a unavoidable cost, and that's the cost to do with moving. So moving HQ. So our current office location is in Union Street. We are based, MOPAC is based, and VRU are based in the LFB headquarters. The lease is due to expire, and MOPAC will be required to relocate. We've identified a relocation site, and there will be costs associated with that relocation. They will be one-off. And so there wasn't criteria as such applied to our decision to ensure that we adequately fund that, but there are costs included in our budget to fund that one-off. There'll be revenue and capital costs associated with that.
Right. So if I understood you correctly, it's not growth in the sense that...
It's not recurrent growth, but it is an extra. I suppose it's how we present. It is an extra, and it's a new cost to our budget, and it's not a cost you would have seen in the 25-26 budget. And the vast proportion of it actually is not a cost that you will see in our 27-28 budget. It's specifically in 26-27. But because it's new, I think the terminology that's used is growth, but it's not a growth area as such.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Garbett.
Hello. I've got just a headline question for Amana and then, some follow-up questions for Lib, probably. What will the impact of the reduction of MOPAC services funded by... What will be the impact of the reduction in MOPAC services funded by the government? I just want to understand the kind of complexity of MOPAC's overall funding and the impacts that's going to have, because I'm aware that there's some services that are going to be losing funding.
So MOPAC, I will just come back to the MOPAC plan, which is a MOPAC developed programme to address our structural deficit, and that has two components. One component will be reducing commissioned services, and the other component is reducing workforce. Both of those are impact assessed. The workforce component is currently out to consultation with staff. The consultation closes this month. We will be reviewing counter proposals received before we hope to finalise the workforce savings that we are planning for 26-27. Similarly, we are going through a process of internal governance on the commission services reductions. We've applied a set of criteria in assessing our totality of commission services. So the criteria include things like impact on PCP delivery, impact on the Mayor's manifesto commitments, impact to vulnerable Londoners, impact on any services and provision that might impact the Met Police. So we've gone through a fairly comprehensive analysis and identified a set of proposed service reductions, which are currently going through governance in terms of being confirmed.
Yeah, and I think that's really disappointing. I know that the MOPAC commissions a range of really good services, and I think it's a real shame that we've reached this point. I mean, I've mentioned before that I was doing this kind of work in the NHS like 10, 12 years ago, and I just think it's a real shame that we're still going through these exercises of decommissioning services. In terms of the impact of the loss of these services, I mean, you mentioned there the criteria that you're using, which is really helpful to understand. So as a totality, what is the expected impact of the loss of these services? Could you give us a flavour of the kind of things that might happen? Or do you know what I mean? Like, what are the kind of negative consequences of this
I can't give you specifics until a formal decision's been made, because I'd be giving you detail of proposals, not decisions. But just to give you a sense that in some instances they are just reductions in services. They're proposed reductions in services rather than outright removal of services. In other areas where there are any proposals that potentially remove services altogether, we have sought to only focus on those areas where we deem an impact to be, where we've thought about the recipients of those services and thought about any alternative provision that might be available for those service users.
And in terms of the advocacy that those services are able to do, obviously we give the Met a big platform to talk about the impact of their budget and their budget cuts. I'm just wondering how Assembly members or others are hearing about the potential impact of some of these services. I know that they're sensitive because a lot of them will lead to staff impacts, but I'm just aware of the disproportionate kind of platform that the Met are given over some of these really important services.
I understand what you're saying. The Met, as a billion-pound organisation, has a certain platform, as opposed to some of these organisations that have quite limited funding streams and are relatively small in terms of their constitution. We actively engage with them. The Mayor actively engages with them. They are able to come to forums like this and attend the public gallery and sort of hear our latest position. And I'm assuming they can come to you directly should they wish you to lobby on their behalves.
Yeah, I just think it'd be good for the committee to just be even if you can show us privately the kind of decisions that are being made, just so we can look at where the money's being spent between the decisions being made. That's really helpful. And the other bit is around kind of longer term funding. A lot of the youth services that I talk about, and I know the Met mentioned this themselves around needing a multi-year settlement, but I know that that's really important for our voluntary sector partners, just making sure they've got that kind of commitment. So I didn't know what considerations being done or lobbying to make sure that they're able to get that longer-term funding.
It's a source of frustration for us as well. It would help both MOPAC, and within that I include VRU and the Met, to know where our settlements will go beyond the 12-month period or not. So it's something that we lobby about constantly. MOPAC receives funding from a number of different sources. So largely we are funded by the police grant. So we are subject to the same uncertainties that the Met are. We're waiting for confirmation from the Home Office on the provisional police settlement. We also get some discrete pots of other government department funding. So, for example, we get funding from the MOJ to support our victim services. We've actually just had that confirmed this month. I believe it was embargoed until the first week of December. We're now past the embargo date. They've confirmed actually that the level of budget that we've assumed from the MOJ in 26-27 will materialise, and they've given us that certainty for 2 years, and that's really positive. So that shows you that in our lobbying of working with our partners and our funding sources to request multi-year settlements, in some instances we are able to get that confirmation. We're asking the same of the Home Office in terms of their funding of the VRU. We are yet to receive confirmation from the Home Office as to whether our funding assumption for 26-27 will materialise. But as part of that, we are hoping they give us more than 1 year certainty.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Specifically on the VRU, actually, welcome, Lib. When we met numerous times in activities that you've been involved in Croydon, which is obviously my constituency. I've seen the positive work. One of the things that was a bit less positive, the VRU doesn't seem to be a separate line item in the budget submission anymore. So is there a reason for that? And could you let us know what that breakdown is? I don't know whether that's a question for you, Lib, or for you, Amana. I don't know who's responsible for line items. Amana, is that your department?
So MOPAC is one corporation sole, and the VRU are within that. We follow the GLA's budget guidance in terms of how to report the MOPAC budget. We did issue an addendum, which is published on our website, which shows MOPAC's net service expenditure, shows it as a totality, and then it splits it by MOPAC and the VRU.
So that wasn't in the original submit. There's an addendum that we need to go and track down. It sounds like
There is now a published. But you are correct. It wasn't in the original budget, but there is now a published addendum which gives you the separation for
Appendix C is being helpfully
MOPAC and the VRU.
put in front of me here. Okay. So what does that mean then in terms of the VRU, specifically thinking about the VRU funding? Where does that leave that for next year, do we think? Yeah, Lib.
To answer that, so we get 2/3 of our money from the mayor. That's consistent. I mean, you'll spot there's some variation from the year we're in at the moment and the next financial year, which we can delve into if you want to. But essentially, the budget is forecasting a return from the Home Office of 9.4 million. But yet, as Amana has just mentioned, we are not certain of receiving that. So it will be substantially impactful for us if we don't get the 9.4 million.
That was 10. Was it 10.5 last year? So it's down from 10.
Well,
the Home Office
that's
bit.
because there was additional things added to it. So, for example, the implementation of the serious violence duty was included in that, and that is no longer actually an expenditure. So, there was added things to it, but in essence, it's been 9.4 for several years, really.
And that's just the Home Office bit. So the total VRU funding, forgive me.
Yeah. So the total VRU funding for the next financial year, 26-27, is 35.1 million, which incorporates the 9.4 from the Home Office, with the mayoral, therefore, contribution of 25.4.
And and what was that? Apologies. What was that? The previous current year. So that's for the forecast year. And the current year, the total.
So the overall expenditure, gross expenditure for last year was 37.4 million, and the difference essentially is around two of our pots that the mayor had awarded us to do 2-year programmes came to an end. So, for example, over a course of 2 years, he funded youth workers in some of the robbery hotspots outside schools, and also made available additional funding for MyEnds, which was actually taking the MyEnds model that you just spoke to, not doing the full kind of MyEnds treatment in an area, but ensuring that there was a localised plan for some of the other local authorities. So that's what was captured in those two areas.
And that's coming to an end.
Both of those were always going to be 2-year projects. They're coming to an end. And then we've got some other smaller projects that are also coming to an end. But we have also taken over from MOPAC the violence and exploitation contract. So that then adds in additional expenditure to us.
So forgive me then, you'll obviously there's a complicated picture because it's not quite an ongoing. So let's stick with MyEnds, for example. So is that the whole thing is coming to an end?
No, not at all. Not at all. I wasn't clear. I'm pleased you asked me that clarification then. No, MyEnds is continuing and has been extended. MyEnds, for those members of the committee less familiar, is in 9 neighbourhoods across London. Some of those neighbourhoods are all of those neighbourhoods actually have been affected very badly by long-term kind of terrible concoction of kind of poverty and violence and deprivation, and working and putting communities in the leadership role there has meant that funding has gone in for the last 3 years and is continuing. So there's no change to that. What I was trying to say was we learning the lessons of that very, very neighbourhood-specific programme. The mayor then awarded 2 years additional funding to boroughs who hadn't got a MyEnds programme to hone in on an area in their borough that was particularly affected by violence. It was a different way of doing it because it was led by the council as opposed to led by the community that you're very aware of. So no, it's that aspect of it. The MyEnds programme is much a flagship programme for us and will be continuing.
Okay. And you mentioned, apologies, you mentioned as well in your previous answer something that was moved from MOPAC over to the VRU. So that, forgive me for putting my cynical hat on, but that sounds like an additional cost with no extra money. Is that unfair?
No. It's additional money that's coming over. We're taking over that contract. And I think that's an exciting opportunity for us because it is all around violence and exploitation around young people, and it fits very much into the sort of other work that we're doing very neatly. So we'll be able to look, for example, at the synergy between that and the work that's going on in MyEnds, and also some of the youth work that we're funding in custody suites or in hospitals, where we know we're having real impact when youth workers see those young people, and being able to put that all together. So I think it's a good strategic move, and obviously it also comes with its budget.
Okay, and then so finally, then looking forward for the VRU, what are the new projects, new initiatives that you're looking that may be starting, let's say, that aren't currently running, that may be starting or ramping up in the next year or two?
Well, we try and do a balance. I think it's very important of using the evidence that we've got to continue with things that are working. I've spoken about my end, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I am going to say there's a raft of education projects that we are funding that are really beginning to bear impact. So we're in, I think, then year 2 of an Oracy programme in primary schools that early stages has given us incredibly good results of kids who can't communicate as well, catching up with peers in their year group. All important, because one of the things we need to stop is exclusions, because we know that pipeline over to prison. And we're also working and expanding the pre-mentoring scheme that we've got as well, which is mentoring for kids who unfortunately have already been excluded or suspended and are in pupil referral units. So there's a raft of educational stuff there that is having impact. We're now, we could actually speak to, having worked with 110,000 young people across London in a school environment, be that healthy relationships, be that pre-mentoring, and there's good impact there. So that's very exciting. And then there is clearly the challenges of kids not being in school, and I don't mean from exclusion or suspension, I mean because it's the holidays or because it's that period after school which is dangerous. So working across the GLA and thinking about those after school activities, expanding our programme on Stronger Futures is a really important part. And then in terms of new pieces of work, we've been very integral to developing the government's approach towards prevention partnerships and prevention panels. We had a system that meant that we were able to work across the big public sector organisations in London and come to a consensus about where those 4 panels are, hoping that that will embed with the Young Futures programme that was again announced yesterday as part of the youth strategy. And also what we pick up from our excellent Young People's Action Group is the importance of online work, and you know how far away we as adults are from the challenges of that. We've got some interesting research coming out next year, which is about whether the relationship between online violence and real life violence, and looking at those connections. And we're doing a lot of changing the way we do some of the training of young people and how we tackle misogyny through that. So lots of interesting things, but trying to do a mix of what's innovation and also what we know is working. So otherwise we're in that danger of just dropping some money in for a year, pulling it out, and then leaving communities sort of feeling they've had the benefit, but they've not been able to do anything sustainable.
Okay. I mean, that sounds quite positive. Just, I'm very conscious of time, and it's me that's supposed to be policing my use of time. But I just want to flag up, having looked at this table, it looks like the 25, 26, 27, 28, the total funding is 26.3, 25.4, 24.0, and 23.7. So that's a downward trend. So that's going to have an impact on, is that an across-the-board general impact, or are there specific things that are going to have to come out because of that?
Well, we are lucky because the VRU has a balanced budget, so we're not facing the structural deficit challenges that MOPAC are having to face. But of course it means that some programmes will come to an end, and what we try and do is do that thoughtfully. I think Amana laid out a series of tests as to what you would use and the evidence you've got. But it's also about using some of the partnerships that we're already working with to try and attract additional resource. So we're very mindful, for example, in the My Ends context, that although it is going on for a couple more years, at some point we might not be funding all of those schemes, and it might be we look in other parts of London. So what is the sustainability there? Who are we managing to bring in and support that work? In a health context, there's a couple of really impactful programmes that have stopped this year. One of them is the IRIS programme, which identifies people who come in and aren't necessarily revealing but are presenting the impacts of domestic abuse and how health professionals can be supported. And so we've been talking to the integrated care boards across London and promoting the work of IRIS. So we try to build in that sustainability, and we absolutely try and do it with the groups that are going to be affected. But at the moment, as long as our Home Office money comes through, we are more than able to manage with what we've got, although prevention is such an important part of what we do to bring down violence figures that it's key that is recognised and that we keep getting the level of funding we are, because we're seeing positive impact across London.
I would like to spend more time, but I'm sorry.
Just to say, if you could send us some KPI figures for the last couple of years.
All of our KPI figures, all our performance, and now over 30 evaluations of different aspects of our work are on our website. I mean, so I'm
your
happy.
office
I'm happy to send stuff, but genuinely, it might actually be easier to just look on that because all of it's there, and I'm not, you know. You don't want me to send you 36 evaluations
No, just
or
for the
whatever.
last year, 2 years.
So, yeah, it's all there, but please do look at it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are very much beyond our time, so I'd just like to finish up. Thank you very much for all of our guests and the Deputy Mayor who now has departed for attending this morning and answering all of our questions. That concludes that section of our meeting, so you're free to leave. Thank you very much for your time. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? And can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with the group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Finally, then, can we note the committee's work programme and meeting dates? The next meeting of the committee will be held on the 16th of December 2025 at 10 a.m. here in the Chamber in City Hall. I have no urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everyone.